Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I'm Ben Davis, 40 years old, married to Kathy Davis for 16 years, and we have a 14-year-old daughter named Maria. Recently, I received a text and a picture that made me question whether Kathy and I would make it to our 19th anniversary. I work as a salesman for a local electrical supply company, covering a 45-county area. My job often requires overnight stays, as I visit factories and job sites. I'm good at what I do, probably because I started out as a maintenance electrician, which gave me a solid foundation. At 6 feet 0 inches and 180 pounds, I'm in decent shape. Outside of work, I'm always tinkering with PLCs and robotic controls, and I've even managed to sell a few of my programs. My bosses have been supportive, as sales of robotic controllers typically rise when I sell one of my programs. I've been putting the extra income into a separate account at a different bank, which I've dubbed my secret stash. It's not quite where I want it to be yet, but my goal is to retire by 50 if I can make it happen. I was on a job site, staying overnight to troubleshoot a controller issue for one of our customers. Around 4 p.m., I got a notification for a text message. I couldn't check it right away, so I decided to wait until I was at dinner. When I finally looked at it, I was stunned. It was a naked selfie of my wife, Kathy, with a message attached, "Roger, my love machine. My whole husband is going to be gone tonight, and the darling little mistake is at a sleepover. So come on over and do it again." That moment marked the end of my marriage and the start of what would become my revenge. I quickly forwarded the text to my email so I wouldn't lose it. After dinner, I called my customer, explained that something had come up and I needed to head home, promising I'd follow up with him the next afternoon. He understood. I had met Kathy years earlier while working at a newly constructed auto plant, where I was contracted to handle maintenance and testing on an upcoming assembly line. I had programmed the system and was in the middle of debugging and adjusting it before the final handoff to the plant. It was there I was introduced to Kathy, a pretty woman who seemed to be around my age. She was introduced as Kathy Chalmers, the company liaison and engineering assistant. I was told she'd be working with me and the acceptance engineer during the debugging phase of the installation. Kathy was not afraid to get into the guts of the checkout process. When I was adjusting sensors, she was right there to hand me tools or provide an extra hand when needed. We talked as we worked, and I found out that she was 21 to my 22. She did not have a man in her life, and I did not have a lady friend. I found she liked, of all things, to play cards. She liked contract bridge, for-handed pinnacles, and canasta. She also liked the theater, hiking, and fishing. The debugging and adjustments took the better part of a week, but because of the help I received, that was more than a week less than planned. When I presented the final report to the plant and production managers, I praised them for the excellent help they had given me as well as the cooperation of their entire group. I made a special point to ask if I could personally thank Ms. Chalmers, as she was instrumental in the early finish. I was shown to her office by the production manager, and he left. I thanked Kathy and asked if she would like to meet me after work for a supper or a drink. She asked where and what time. We agreed on a time and went to a little mom and pop restaurant that was a few blocks from the plant. During that first date, I found out she also enjoyed poker and dancing. We dated exclusively for the next year. We were regular partners at a local card room. We went to plays, dances, and dinners. On Valentine's Day, about 13 months after we started dating, I proposed to her and she accepted. The wedding was originally planned for the following June, but the planning got a little out of hand. We finally got married on Valentine's Day, 1 year after we became engaged. The wedding was grand, and we honeymooned in Brazil. What a country of contrast. Rio was high-rises on the main street, and around the corner were slums. Prostitutes of both sexes, some as young as 10, were all over the streets. They would be there as early as 1 p.m. and still there at 2 a.m. I would never go back there. Sao Paulo was polluted and overcrowded. We still managed to have a good time. We had each other. After we had been married about 8 months, the company I had worked for was bought out and broken up. I was laid off and began looking for a new job. After about a month, I was hired by a company specializing in turnkey production facilities. I was given a huge raise over what I was making before, and for a guy under 25 and without a college degree, I was in high cotton. That job unfortunately required extensive travel, and that did not sit well with Kathy. We had many arguments about me not being there for her. She seemed to try to compensate by spending. Then we had arguments about money. I kept telling her that I did not make as much money as she spent. Twice she threatened to get a divorce, and both times I called her bluff. The first time she went away for a week. The second time, I settled her bluff by packing her stuff and showing her the door. She ran home to Mama and was told to go back and be a partner, not a complainer. She was also told that at 25 I was making more money than her father was at 55. I warned her that she had to control her spending and that I was actively seeking an inside job either with the current company or a new one. I also told her that the threat of divorce was her last threat. If she threatened it again, she would get her wish. Things got better and stayed that way for a long time. Kathy got pregnant just about the time I was offered a design position with the company I was working for. She was overjoyed with the regular hours and the extreme cutback in out-of-town trips. There were a couple a year, that was all. Kathy's pregnancy was a difficult one, and when Maria was born, we decided that there would be no more. I got snipped. Maria was a good child, and Kathy was a great and nurturing mother. I was just as clueless as any other father, and by the time she was walking, I knew I was defeated. That little smiling face was the ruler of my being. I was now third on the totem: Maria, Kathy, and Ben. We had a wonderful life, and after Maria was in school full-time, Kathy went to work at a different engineering firm as an administrative assistant. We did all of the kids' vacation stuff, Six Flags, Disney World, and others, but by the time Maria was 10, she would rather go to a museum, a classical music event, an art exhibit, or stage play than an amusement park. She was also a tomboy and was constantly helping with my tinkering. We had all of the little life dramas. I was laid off of a couple of different jobs, but always found new one or was called back quickly. Maria had most of the childhood diseases: measles, mumps, and chickenpox. She could not get the vaccines because she was allergic to eggs and egg products. Fortunately, she seemed to outgrow that when she hit puberty. She also had the usual cuts and bumps that all kids seem to get. She broke her arm when she was 7 by being pushed off of a swing while at recess in 2nd grade. She was proud of her cast. I was devastated when she went on her first date. It was a group of 3 girls and 3 boys going to a 7th grade dance, but I was sad to see my little girl was growing up. She would not be allowed to go on a single couple date until she was 16, but she went to all the school functions with a group of the same girls and rotating boys. There never seemed to be more than once or twice with the same boy. Life went on, and when our 15th anniversary was approaching, I got an inside sales job at the company I now work for. By that time, I had also gotten my bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, so more design projects were also coming my way. The design projects were a sideline and done with my company's blessing. After I had been on the inside job for about 16 months, my current job was offered to me. As I was, and always would be, a roadie at heart, I took it. I turned out to be a good face-to-face salesman. The job caused a lot of complaints about my being away a lot. Then instead of threats of divorce, she started to use sex or withholding sex as a weapon. I told her that if that was what she thought, she needed to get out. If she thought that my earning money to provide for my family was worth wrecking our family, fine. I warned her that I wanted her, I loved her, and I would die for her. But now she was not worth one argument, so she needed to decide what was going to happen going forward. Then about 3 months later came the text message. I quickly checked out of my hotel room and reserved another for the next night. I loaded my car and left for home. I had about a 3-hour drive. I called my parents and Kathy's parents and told them I wanted to give Kathy a just because surprise and that I wanted them to be at my house at 10 p.m. I asked them to park in the street and not go into the house until I got there. They both agreed. I arrived a little after 10 o'clock. They were all in their cars waiting. We walked to the kitchen door and quietly walked into the living room. There was a pile of men's clothes folded in my chair. I pointed to the bedroom and made a quiet gesture with my index finger. We walked to the bedroom, and through the open door saw Kathy face down on the bed with a man having sex with her. Her face was buried in a pillow so she didn't see us. I went up and tapped the man on the shoulder, and when he turned I laid him out cold with the right hand to the chin. It sounded like I might have broken some teeth. I also broke 2 bones in my hand. Kathy's head came up, and before she saw me, she saw our parents standing in the doorway. Her mother was crying on her dad's shoulder. My mother had her hand over her mouth, and my dad had a look of total disgust on his face. Surprise. I said, that selfie was a great thing to see on my phone. You need to drag this a hole. No, wait. I'm the a-hole, this sorry maggot face, and you, out of this house. I continued. I'm glad you think your loving daughter was a mistake, because you won't need to see her much after the divorce. You had better start getting dressed and remove this garbage from here before I really get pissed. Kathy started wailing and saying it was nothing, just a big mistake. I shot back. Just as big a mistake as your 15-year-old daughter? Or was it just a mistake that you sent me the naked selfie instead of this piece of shit? Which was it? This was not the first time either, was it? How long have you and this a-hole here been screwing behind my back? Is he the only one? Or are there a whole string of them out there? Kathy reacted as if I slapped her to each question. She didn't answer any of them. Maggot face was coming around, and Kathy realized that she was naked. She pushed past our parents and ran into the bathroom and slammed and locked the door. Maggot Face finally joined the waking world, and when I stepped out of the way, bolted for his clothes in the living room. He took less than a minute to put his pants on, grab the rest of his clothes, and leave. His car squealed out of the driveway and down the street. The parents left the bedroom area, but my dad whispered in my ear that he had a short video of the scene before I punched a hole out and after Kathy saw all of us. I thanked him for his forethought and asked him to send it to me by email. I thought that I might need it for the lawyer. My parents left, and Kathy's mother shooed us all out into the living room and went in and helped Kathy pack some stuff. Her mom informed all of us that she was taking Kathy to their house for a few days, just until things settled down, she said. I called my boss and told him a sanitized version of what happened. He said he would send an engineer up to the job I was on, and for me to take all of the time I needed to deal with the problem. He had been shafted by a cheating wife and did this for all of his employees, male or female. I called the customer early the next morning and told him of the changes. Maria came home just about the time I had gotten the mattress and box spring out into the yard. I had already thrown the sheets, pillowcases, and blankets into the trash. She had a knowing look on her face. She said, "Sorry, Dad. I wish I had told you that I suspected that Mom was messing around, because about every second time you took a trip to a customer site, she would arrange for me to go somewhere for a sleepover. This was about the fourth time," she continued. "She hasn't been very nice to me for the past year or so. Not really mean, just not caring what I wanted or needed. I don't know if she started to screw around then, or if it started later, but when you divorce, I want to stay with you," she added. "I know you have to occasionally go out of town overnight, but I talked to your Aunt Mary, my mother's sister, a spinster, and she said she could come and stay for a couple of days when needed. I knew that if you found out, it would mean the end of the marriage." I spent the next day closing all of the credit card accounts, locking down the bank accounts except for automatic payments, and putting all of my video and email evidence in a safe deposit box. I took my private stash money and got a couple of debit cards, one for Maria and one for me. They were daily limit cards, $500 a day for me and $50 for Maria. Maria had her own savings, but I would not let her touch that except in an absolute emergency. I did not worry she was going to suddenly go out and start burning through money, and she didn't. I also contacted a lawyer and started the divorce. Adultery is a felony in our state, seldom enforced, but still on the books. So, I had the lawyer make up 2 sets of papers, one for irreconcilable differences with Kathy relinquishing custody and all claims to any of my go to hell money or property, and one for adultery and those to be held over her head to sign the first. It turned out that Roger was a new, young, 12 years younger than Kathy, working as an engineer at Kathy's firm. He ended up with a dislocated jaw, 3 broken teeth. He was also fired when I filed a lawsuit against the company. He tried to come after me for assault, but his wife warned him that she would financially wreck him in their divorce if he continued to pursue me. The company settled the suit for a medium bucket of money, and at my insistence, Kathy kept her job. Someone, I think Kathy's mother, convinced her to fight the divorce and request counseling. I changed the reason for adultery and refused to go to counseling. I spent a weekend in jail before Kathy withdrew the objections and the divorce was granted. The judge was not real pleased with Kathy or her lawyer, so he gave me the house, custody, all of my go-to-hell money, and 75% of the savings and checking. We each kept our own retirement accounts, and my profit sharing was split 90-10 me. No alimony, no child support. As I had the house and I received custody with Maria's request. It was just the end of a marriage. Kathy was allowed unlimited visitation, but she could not take Maria overnight or out of the county without court permission. About a year after the divorce, Kathy asked to sit down with me. She apologized for the pain she had caused and said she didn't fully understand why she'd done what she did to our family. She told me she had requested, and been granted, a transfer to an office in another state. As a result, she would only be seeing Maria a few times a year. However, she promised she would be there for the big events, birthdays, graduation, and the wedding. For the first year, she kept her word. But after that, it was just cards, birthday cards with money, graduation cards with more money. Maria never cashed the checks. She told me that if all her mother thought she was worth was a piece of paper, then she didn't want to lose that paper. I laughed when Maria said it, and she smiled, knowing that I understood the weight of what she meant. Kathy never showed up for Maria's wedding or the births of her grandchildren. Her parents, however, were always loving grandparents and treated me well. They later told me that Kathy had asked them not to share any family news with her. It seemed that updates about the family caused her a lot of pain. Kathy never remarried. She passed away at 50 from complications related to diabetes and personal neglect. About 5 years after the divorce, I sold a particularly complex piece of software that brought in a small fortune, enough to make early retirement a reality. I officially retired at 50. At 54, I met and married a lovely widow, and we moved to Florida to escape the harsh winters. Tampa was, and still is, a great place for seniors. Now, my daughter's family visits every other year for 2 weeks over Christmas, a couple of weeks during spring break, and occasional weekends. I get to spoil the grandkids, give my beautiful daughter big hugs, and enjoy the company of the wonderful man she married. They're fantastic parents. Life is much better now. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
This story is almost unbelievable, full of ups and downs that could be a movie. I've been happily married for over 30 years, or so I thought. I have 3 beloved children and owned a convenience store gas station. I'm not rich, but make a good living. A few years ago, my 28-year-old son was hospitalized with a kidney problem. He's married with 2 children. My wife Annabelle, Annie, and I were terrified for his life. The doctor said he might need a transplant if his condition didn't improve. They suggested we talk to family members about donation possibilities. Without telling Annie, I got tested to see if I was a match. The results showed I wasn't compatible. Shocked, I asked the doctor why, considering he was my son. The doctor, embarrassed by my outburst, asked me to come into his office. "Mr. Weller, the test shows you're not his biological father. We're redoing the test to confirm," he said. In shock, I couldn't tell Annie yet. Questions about my other children, Janice and Mandy, raced through my mind. Janice was 26, Mandy 20. I hoped the doctor was wrong. 2 days later, the doctor brought good news. Brad's kidneys were responding to treatment, and he wouldn't need a transplant. Relieved, everyone cried with joy. I still hadn't told Annie about the test. The next day, I asked Annie, Janice, and Mandy for DNA samples, explaining it would help in future medical issues. Annie was nervous but agreed, as did the others. I also collected samples from Janice's family. The hospital confirmed Brad wasn't biologically mine. I asked them to analyze the other samples. "Mr. Weller, are any of them your family?" "They're all my family. I need to know if Janice and Mandy are my biological children," I replied. Brad was released from the hospital a few days later. After a week of recovery, he could return to work. Everyone was relieved he didn't need dialysis or a transplant. I tried to stay calm, but it was hard. I needed to know if my daughters were biologically mine. Annie noticed my odd behavior and asked about it almost every night. I told her I was just thinking about our children, which was partly true. One evening, I came home to find Annie crying over some papers from the hospital. "When did you do it, and why?" she asked. "I got tested to see if I could donate my kidney to our son. The doctor said I wasn't his biological father, so I had tests done on the girls too." Annie revealed, "Janice isn't yours, but Mandy is." She was crying hard. "What happens now, Dan?" I didn't know. After 30 years of marriage, I just learned 2 of my children weren't mine. I told Annie, "We need to talk. Maybe we'll stay together, or maybe we'll split up." "Dan, that was over 28 years ago. Can't we leave the past behind?" "No, we can't. You had an affair. I need to know who I've been raising. Janice and Brad are siblings, so this wasn't a one-time thing. Who were you having an affair with?" "It was Harvey. It was stupid and wrong, but it's over." "Harvey, our best friend who died 25 years ago? Did his wife Mary know? Did she join you?" "Please, Dan, let's not discuss this. I love you. This is ancient history. Can't we move on?" "Are you out of your mind? We got married, and within a year you started sleeping with Harvey. I raised his child as my own. If he hadn't died, you'd probably still be with him. Explain this." Annie was crying, but I wanted the truth. "I know you and Harvey were friends." "I always loved him, but he chose Mary. I loved you too, but not as much. After he married Mary, I was depressed. You asked me to marry you, and I did it partly out of spite. I wanted to show Harvey I could move on. Then we started an affair. You were often away, and Harvey would come by. It just happened. He stopped seeing me after I got pregnant with Brad. He asked if the baby was his, and I told him I didn't know but wouldn't tell you unless he married me. He laughed and said you could raise his baby. Do you really think I'm that stupid? It just happened. What just happened? If you think I'll believe it just happened, you must be crazy. What about Janice? Did the same thing happen to her? I told him he couldn't come over unless you or Mary were here. I had feelings for him, but he was using me for lovemaking. One day he forced himself on me and threatened to tell you about Brad. He hurt me and said he hoped he got me pregnant again. I couldn't tell you because I didn't want to lose you. After Janice was born, Harvey died in a car accident. I was sad but relieved. I could finally put it behind me and focus on us. I loved you more and more. We had a good life, didn't we? Annie asked. Yes, our marriage was good, but now I see it was based on lies. You cheated on me, married me while loving another man, and had children with him. Now you expect me to forget about it. I can't. I'm going to see a lawyer and start divorce proceedings. Dan, you can't. What about our kids? What will you tell them? You can tell them. And just so you know, I don't believe you were molestated. You would have continued the affair if Harvey hadn't died. You have a week to tell me your story. After that, I'll tell them the truth. I assume Brad and Janice don't know I'm not their biological father. No one knows but me, and now you. Please, Dan, they love you. Don't hurt them by telling them their real father is a man they've never met. I am their father. I've raised them, and that won't change. We'll both stay here until the divorce is finalized, unless you have another lover. That's inappropriate, Dan, and you know it. No, the problem is I've been with you for 30 years, and I don't know you. I'll move into the guest bedroom. I don't want anything to do with you. Annie wept as I relocated to the guest room. 2 days later, a call came from the store. Annie's car had crashed after speeding and failing to navigate a turn. Tragically, she died on impact. The sheriff probed for any issues, but I reported none, classifying it as an accident pending autopsy. Breaking the news to our children was agonizing for us all, fueling my doubts about whether it was truly an accident or something more sinister. Days later, the autopsy confirmed it was indeed accidental. At her funeral, I mourned deeply, despite our separation. 3 decades of shared history left me grappling with unresolved emotions. Choosing to keep her affair secret, I resisted consulting a lawyer. The day after her funeral, I asked my daughters and daughter-in-law to divide Annie's belongings, keeping only a few cherished family photos. Tormented by what-ifs, I pondered the consequences of my actions and wondered if things could have been different, or if fate had simply intervened on that fateful day. Update. This happened 2 years ago, just before the holidays. I found myself alone again. My son and oldest daughter live about 100 miles away, and I told them I could visit for a day or two. Mandy, a senior in college, planned to go to England with friends for the holidays. She worried about me being alone, but I assured her I had been living alone for 2 years and spent my days at the service station, never really alone. One day, while watching TV, I saw a commercial about donating $24 a month to help a child in a third world country. It made me skeptical about where the money actually goes. The next day, I asked our local priest, Pastor Jim, if the church had a Christmas campaign to help local families. Yes, Dan, we do. Do you have a family in mind? He asked. No, I need the name of a family I can help, I replied. Jim suggested a young widow with 3 children whose husband was eliminated by a criminal. She had moved to our town for a fresh start. Thanks, Jim. I'll come by later to get the name, I said. Pastor Jim understood my intent. Though not a regular churchgoer, I wanted to make a difference. I took the name Carmela Wilson from the tree at church. She worked as a waitress at Joe's restaurant where I often ate. I decided to visit Joe's diner to talk to her. At Joe's, I looked around and saw Carmen, who smiled and said she'd be right over. Carmen was in her early 30s, pleasant-looking, with shoulder-length dark hair. She wasn't thin or fat, just an attractive woman with a nice smile. "What can I do for you?" she asked. "Just a cup of coffee and some conversation, if you don't mind." "Sure, for coffee, but I'm not sure about the conversation," she replied. "I'm sorry, I'm not good at talking to women. This isn't a flirtation. I picked your name from the church tree and want to be your friend for the holidays." "Look, I'm not sure what you want. I'll just get your coffee." She spoke to Joe, who nodded, then returned with my coffee. "Okay, Joe says you're fine. I get hit on a lot and don't need that." "So what do you mean by holiday friend? The church put my kids' names on the tree for Christmas, but they didn't mention this." "This is my idea. If you prefer, I can just buy gifts for your kids." I was watching TV and saw a commercial about donating $24 a month to help children in other countries. It got me thinking, I want to help a family through Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'm not rich, but I can afford to help one family, and I chose yours. Carmen's eyes welled up. "Are you serious? I was so worried about my kids this year. You know, my husband was..." "I know, Carmen. He was homicided. Please let me help you. If I'm interfering, just tell me, and I'll back off." "Why are you doing this? Don't you have family to help?" "My wife died 2 years ago in a car accident." "It's okay, Carmen. My holidays have been pretty lonely, and I want to help someone else be happy this year. My children are grown and doing fine, so what do you say? Can we be friends for the holidays? You have a kind face, Dan. For the sake of my kids, I'll say yes. Please, no tricks. We've been through a lot. Let's start by restocking your coffee and figuring out your needs. She poured more coffee and said she needed to get back to work, but agreed to talk after her shift. The next day, I asked her out to dinner, but she said she needed to be with her kids. Instead, she invited me to her home for dinner. I'll bring pizza. Is pepperoni and cheese okay? She smiled. That's great, but bring 2 pizzas. My 8-year-old can eat half of one himself. When I visited her place, I realized she lived in a housing project. These places often have social services support, but are not the best environments due to pills, lovers, and other issues. Now, more than ever, I wanted to help Carmen and her children. Her 8-year-old son met me at the door. He was a cute boy and asked what I wanted. I said I was the pizza delivery guy and that his mom had invited me. He grinned and said, Mom said her friend is bringing pizza today. We don't get pizza from the store very often. As I entered, 2 other children ran up shouting, Pizza, 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 Mommy, the pizza place is here, a 6-year-old yelled. Carmen appeared from the other room, having tidied up. Children, where are your manners? I thought I taught you better. Sorry, Mom, we were just excited, her oldest son said. We don't get visitors often. Can we have pizza now? Kids, this is Dan, a friend of mine. You can call him Uncle Dan or Mr. Dan, I interrupted. Just call me Dan. What's your name? The oldest replied, My name is Mike, and I'm 8 years old. The second one said, I'm Mark, and I'm 6. This is my little sister Molly. Molly added, I know who I am. My name is Molly, and I'm 4, soon to be 5. I go to kindergarten, and I'm very smart. She looked a lot like her mom. We all sat down to eat pizza. The furniture was old, and they didn't have much. The TV was on, but the picture was poor. While the kids ate and watched cartoons, I asked Carmen what help she needed. Oh my God, I wasn't prepared for this. My kids and I are doing fine. They want what other kids have, but I can't afford it. You've seen our TV with the bad picture. We buy clothes secondhand. They're great kids, but I can't buy bikes or anything that might get stolen, so any gift would be appreciated. Okay, I'll see what I can do. Mike, how about going to the movies on Saturday? There's a new Harry Potter movie. Wow, that would be great. Mom, can we go? Maybe if you behave this week. Dan, you know this is for you too, Carmen. Maybe we'll eat at McDonald's afterward. Molly said, I like McDonald's. They have Happy Meals and a playground. All right, Molly, be good for Mommy, and we'll go. The kids were thrilled, and Carmen was smiling. I felt good making them happy. We spent weekends taking the kids to fun places. I started eating lunch at Joe's and always sat in Carmen's section, leaving her big tips. Dan, you don't need to do that. Just make my kids happy. So you don't need the money? I smiled. That's not fair, Dan. I can use the money. I just feel awkward and indebted. Can I make you Thanksgiving dinner or something? I need to do something for you too. I'll talk to the kids, see what's on our agenda, and call you back. Carmen, I do this because it makes me happy. I enjoy helping people who are trying to help themselves. Please don't feel like you owe me anything. Seeing the kids' faces is enough payback, and your smile is a bonus. She looked slightly embarrassed and turned away. Mandy came home one weekend and asked what was new. I told her about Carmen and how I was helping her. Dad, do you think this is a good idea? You don't really know her. Honey, helping someone and seeing those kids' faces gives me a new sense of purpose. I want you to meet Carmen and give me your honest opinion. I don't know, Dad. It makes me uneasy. Isn't that a rough neighborhood for a single mom and her kids? Exactly. That's why I want to help them. You've grown up and don't need my help as much anymore, so I feel I should help someone else. I'll meet them, but I won't promise anything. I'll be honest with you. Mandy was worried, but agreed to meet them. On Saturday, I invited Carmen and the kids over. It was chilly, but I decided to grill. Carmen arrived in a beat-up car with the kids. As she unbuckled them, Mandy remarked sarcastically, Nice car, Dad. What would you say if she drove up in a new car? I asked. Great idea, Dad. This is for you. She smiled. Mike and Mark ran up to me. Hey, Uncle Dan. Wow, you live here? What a big house. I introduced them to Mandy as Carmen got Molly out of the car. Mike, Mark, this is my daughter Mandy. Hi, boys. Nice to meet you, Mandy said. Hi, I'm Mike. I'm 8, and Mark is 6. That's our sister Molly. She's 4. Molly walked over, and I picked her up. Mandy watched me closely. Molly is my little friend. She holds her own against her brothers, just like you used to. I laughed. Carmen, this is Mandy, my pride and joy. They greeted each other, and I could almost see their minds working. Carmen smiled and said, "I know this is different. I know you have questions. Let's enjoy today, and I'll try to answer them. Your father is one of the nicest people I've met. Show me the kitchen and we can cook together. Men think grilling is a whole meal, but we know better." Mandy looked at me and said, "I like her already, Daddy." They smiled and we went inside. The kids explored the house, but were told to stay out of the drawers and not to run. They came back excitedly and told their mom everything they saw. They asked to watch my big screen TV, and I suggested we go to the store to pick out some DVDs. They eagerly agreed, and Molly asked to go too, but Carmen intervened. "Molly, why don't you stay here with Mandy and me to help us cook? We girls need to stick together," Carmen suggested. Molly then told me, "Uncle Dan, take the boys and go ahead. I have to help the girls cook." It was adorable coming from a 4-year-old. I assured her it was okay and promised to rent a movie just for her. I got The Little Mermaid and she was thrilled. She asked Mandy and her mom to watch it with her and told the boys they could watch too if they were quiet, acting like a little adult. We decided to spend Thanksgiving at my house. Carmen and Mandy would cook and I would keep the kids busy. I had a pool, closed for winter, and a hot tub, so the kids would bring their swimsuits to soak in it and then watch movies on the big TV. Mandy said she would contact Brad and Janice about the plans and let them know to bring swimsuits if they wanted to use the hot tub. After Carmen and the kids went home, Mandy and I talked. "Dad, Carmen is very nice. She's hardworking and has been through a lot with her husband's homicide. I understand why you want to help her and the kids. She doesn't make excuses and genuinely cares about you." "I hope she's at least a little grateful," I said. "No, Dad. I mean, she might really maybe even love you." "She didn't say that, did she?" "Dad, she didn't have to. Women can sense these things. I think you've fallen for her too. Just be careful." "Mandy, I'm just happy to help. This is the happiest I've seen you since Mom died. I just want you to be aware." Mandy's observation hit home. I felt a deep connection to Carmen and her children. Brad and Janice hesitated, but eventually accepted my invitation for Thanksgiving, understanding my involvement with Carmen's family through the Church Tree Initiative. Carmen and Mandy orchestrated the arrangements smoothly over the ensuing weeks, with Carmen taking the lead in planning. Mandy's return home on Fridays became a routine, and I frequented Carmen's restaurant for lunch, often dropping by her apartment to visit the kids and bring treats. Carmen jokingly accused me of spoiling them. Despite my occasional discomfort seeing Carmen interact with customers, particularly men who flirted with her, I recognized my lack of entitlement to jealousy. Update. On Thanksgiving morning, Carmen and her kids showed up early, Carmen looking lovely in a simple outfit. They and Mandy were already busy in the kitchen. Mandy mentioned she'd invited her boyfriend, a paramedic still in college, to join them. They were headed to England for a hospital project over the holidays, leaving just before Christmas and returning in January. Brad, his wife Gail, and my grandkids arrived next. After hugs all around, the kids immediately inquired about the hot tub. I introduced them to Carmen's children, and they hit it off. Mandy introduced Brad and Gail to Carmen as a good friend, which pleased me. Brad seemed intrigued, while Gail offered to assist in the kitchen. Soon after, Janice and Rob arrived with their kids, who headed to the basement to play with the available toys and gadgets. While the women cooked, the men tried to stay out of their way. The guys were curious about Carmen, and I attempted to explain her situation without revealing too much of my own feelings. Turns out I wasn't very subtle about it. "She looks good, Dad. How old is she?" "About my age?" Brad asked. "She's 31, Brad. She's a wonderful person and deserves some help." Rob added, "Dad, aren't you afraid she might fall in love with you, or you with her?" "Look, I'm a widower, and she's a widow. If something happens, so be it." "Dad, this is kind of inappropriate and personal." "Brad, as my son, I'll tell you. No, I haven't even tried to kiss her. She's a wonderful woman, and I care about her." "I'm sorry, Dad. I know it's none of my business. You must miss Mom. It's been 2 years. This has nothing to do with your mother. I'm lively, and if I find someone attractive, it's my business. Let's change the subject and check on the kids." We went downstairs to watch the kids. Carmen's children got along well with mine. Molly kept coming up to talk to me, which bothered Brad, but Rob found her sweet. Mandy brought her boyfriend Ross down to meet everyone. After introductions, Mandy went back upstairs, and Ross joined our conversation. "I met Mandy's friend, Carmen. She's nice. Mandy told me her husband was homicided." I introduced Carmen's kids to Ross. "Good kids. Too bad about their father. It's great you're helping them, Mr. Weller." "Thanks, Ross. I picked their name off the church tree. So, What's new with you? School and work must be busy. Yes, but we're going on a trip soon. It's work-related, but I'll be with Mandy. How are you and Mandy doing? Brad asked. Ross looked at me, then back at Brad. I love her and plan to propose in front of Big Ben in England. Mr. Weller, do I have your permission? Ross, you don't need my permission. Mandy is capable of making her own decisions. If you need my blessing, you have it. Should I ask her? I think so, but don't mention it yet. I'll see if she's ready. I love her, but I want a yes. Our lips are sealed, Ross. Good luck. The afternoon went wonderfully. Dinner was fantastic, and everyone enjoyed themselves. The kids took turns in the hot tub, but no adults joined them. Carmen told me, maybe another time, and I held her to that. As the evening ended, Mandy and Ross left to be alone. I helped Carmen clean up, and Janice and Gail joined in. Brad told Carmen it was nice meeting her and wished her luck before they left. Janice pulled me aside. Dad, Carmen is great, but she's too young for you. I'm helping her, Dad. She loves you. We asked if she was dating, and she said she had a boyfriend. Dad, you're that boyfriend. Otherwise, she wouldn't have come today. Just be careful. After everyone left, Carmen gathered her kids and told me she had a great time and liked my family. I don't know why, but I leaned in and kissed her. It was a long, soft kiss. When we pulled away, she had tears in her eyes. You didn't have to do that, Dan. I have to go. She gathered the kids, who quickly said goodbye and got into the car. I approached the car window and said, I'm sorry I stepped out of line. Please forgive me. The problem is, Dan, I've wanted you to do this for so long. She drove away, and I didn't hear from her for several days. I was worried about what I had done. On Monday, I went to the restaurant, but she wasn't there. Joe told me she had to take Molly to daycare and would be back soon. I planned to return at lunchtime, but had to cover a shift at work. I tried to give Carmen space, knowing I had overstepped. When I got home, my phone rang. It was Carmen. Hi, Carmen. I'm so sorry, Dan. Our apartment was broken into. They took everything, even the old TV. All we have left are our clothes. She cried. I don't know what to do. The police are here taking a report. That's awful. Carmen, pack your clothes and the kids. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Everything will be fine, I promise. Dan, I didn't know who else to call. It's okay, Carmen. I'm glad you called. Now go pack and I'll be there soon. I drove over and found Carmen and the kids. Molly was crying and scared. I reassured her and decided to take them to my house. Carmen looked surprised. I thought you were dropping us off at a motel for the night. No, you're coming home with me. Pack your car and take my car with the kids. I'll drive yours. She didn't ask questions and did as I said. I spoke to the police officer, gave him my number, and explained they'd be staying with me. The officer said it was unlikely they'd recover anything. With his help, I got Carmen's car started and headed home. When I arrived, Carmen and the kids were on the porch. It's open. Why didn't you come in? You weren't here, and we didn't want to just walk in, Carmen replied. Come on, boys, help me with the bags. Mike and Mark, take your stuff to the room with the bunk beds. Put Molly's and your mom's things in the front bedroom. If you're unsure, leave it in the living room. I turned to Carmen. We need to talk. Molly, help the boys organize. Dan, we can't live here. What will your kids think? Carmen, you need help right now. Let's try this for a few days. You and Molly can share the front bedroom and the boys will be comfortable upstairs. Dan, the boys have school and Molly has kindergarten. I have to work. Living here won't interfere. You might need to leave a bit earlier. I can help with school runs. Call the schools and explain the situation. Give them my name for drop-offs and pickups. It'll work out, I promise. Dan, I care about you. I like you a lot. Your kids know that, and I need you to know that. No, women just know it. Men think differently. Mandy, Janice, and Gail all know. I'm sorry, but I can't hide my feelings. I'll worry about my kids. You already have enough to worry about. And I'm not sorry I kissed you. Just thought you should know. I went upstairs to check the boys' room and ensure the dresser drawers were empty. Carmen assisted the boys in organizing their clothes, while Molly and I cleared out the dresser drawers in her room. Once everyone joined us, Molly asked if she could put away her belongings. While Carmen unpacked, I took the boys to prepare dinner. We settled on hot dogs and macaroni and cheese. During the meal, Carmen inquired about house rules. I explained that we would establish them gradually. Until then, the kids needed permission for everything, couldn't enter my room or office without invitation, and were to stay away from the closed pool. They could use the hot tub with permission and watch TV with approval. Keeping their rooms tidy was their responsibility. Carmen chuckled, knowing the boys weren't the tidiest, but at least the rules were clear. I looked at the kids, including Molly, who was always smiling at me. Kids, this is your home now. Have fun, but always ask your mom if you're unsure about something. Uncle Dan, what if we get hungry? Mike asked. Eat. Tomorrow your mom and I will buy snacks. You will always have food. Remember, your mom is the boss. If your mom says no, don't ask me, and vice versa. No means no. Any other questions? Molly raised her hand, which made me laugh. What, honey? Carmen asked. Are we allowed to play with the toys in the basement? Because they're not ours. Honey, you can play with all the toys downstairs. We'll talk to Santa, and he'll probably get you some of your own, I told Molly. Molly raised her hand again. Can I go play with them? Yes, honey, you go ahead. I'll join you in a bit, Carmen said. Molly headed downstairs, followed by the boys. One of them shouted, Uncle Dan, can we turn on the TV? I replied, yes, just not too loud. Carmen hugged me with tears in her eyes and said, I don't know what I would have done without you. She wiped her tears, and we didn't kiss or hug again. I squeezed her hands and said, I'll always be here for you. Let's see what the kids are doing. We went to the basement to join the kids. It felt like a family. It reminded me of when Annie and I used to watch the kids play. As it got late, Carmen told the children to take a bath and get ready for bed. She asked the boys to use the bathroom upstairs, and if Molly could use the main bathroom on the first floor. Carmen, this is your home now. Of course, Molly can use the big tub and shower. I'll use the basement shower if needed. Please, make yourself comfortable. While Carmen got the kids ready for bed, I went to my office to work on my books. I saw Molly peeking in, dressed in her nightgown. Hi, Molly. Do you need anything? I want to kiss you goodnight, but Mom said I can't come in until you say so. Come on in, sweetie. She climbed into my lap, wrapped her arms around my neck, and kissed my cheek. Good night, Uncle Dan, she said. Good night, sweetheart. Where's Mommy? Upstairs arguing with Mikey and Marky. Let's go help. We went upstairs and found them mid-argument. But Mom, Mike always gets his way because he's older. I just asked for the top bunk, and he said he gets to choose because he's older. Carmen looked at Mike. Is that what you said, Mike? Yeah, but I'm older, so I should get to choose. Mike, you're 2 years older, so you should be 2 years smarter. Is it worth arguing over which bed you sleep in? Why not share the top bunk and take turns? Mike looked at Mark. Okay, Mark, you can have the top bunk this month, and I'll take it next month. We'll swap every month. Deal? Yeah. Thanks, Mike, Mark said, climbing into the top bunk. You feel good inside, don't you, Mike? Carmen asked. Yeah, I guess so, Mom. Carmen kissed her sons, then put Molly to bed. I need to get back to my papers and get ready for bed myself, Carmen said. I went back to my office and heard the shower running, thinking about Carmen. When she finished, she came out in her nightgown and robe, her hair still wet. Good night, Dan, and thanks for everything. I looked up and said, Is there anything you don't look good in? She smiled and headed to bed. I could smell her scent and took a few deep breaths, then continued working. Our first morning was hectic. Carmen asked me to call Joe and inform him she might be late. She needed to update the school and daycare about the change of address. When I called Joe, he questioned if I was serious about Carmen, expressing concern for her well-being. Being married for over 40 years, he didn't want her to get hurt. I reassured him that I would never injure Carmen or her kids. In the evening, we returned to her old apartment to gather her belongings, which weren't much. She returned her keys and informed the office about the move due to the break-in. Mike and Mark rode with me in the truck, while Carmen and Molly followed in her car. Upon our return, Carmen received a call from Mandy. After explaining the situation, Mandy requested to speak with me. Dad, are you sure about this? You know she loves you, right? What should I have done, Mandy? Just give her money and tell her to manage on her own? I care about her. We're adults and haven't done anything wrong. I'm actually happy she and the kids are here. It's almost like the good old days. Dad, it's a fine line. I like Carmen as a sister, but you two need to be careful and understand what you're doing. Now, can I talk to Carmen again? She talked to Carmen for about 20 minutes while the boys and I brought the rest of the stuff inside. What did she want after I gave you your phone back? I asked. Mostly girl stuff, but she's worried about us. What's there to worry about? We're adults. I'm in my 50s and can make my own decisions. Dan, she knows how much I care about you. I told her that myself, and now you know. I tried to explain that I didn't know where this was going, but you helped me and the kids. I'm eternally grateful for that, but my feelings are stronger than my gratitude. Mandy is worried one of us will get hurt. I told her I would never come between you and your family. Okay, let's take it one day at a time. Maybe time will help. Just then, Mike and Mark walked in. Uncle Dan, can we go in the hot tub? I looked at Carmen and then at the kids. Only if your mom comes in. You can't go in alone. Come on, Mom, please. It's warm and has lots of bubbles. Okay, boys, get your swimsuits on. Molly, get yours and I'll be right there. She turned to me. You set me up, didn't you? I just smiled, and she smiled back, then put on a two-piece swimsuit. Happy now? She asked, smiling as she walked by. I definitely agree. You rock any outfit. I'm willing to bet you look stunning even without clothes. I grinned. Creep, she retorted, smiling as she headed for the hot tub. The kids eagerly awaited her. Wow, she's even more beautiful, I pondered as she settled into the tub. She seems to have it all. After a few minutes, I handed Carmen a drink. She smiled and said, The water feels great. My body needed this. The kids watched the bubbles. Thanks, Uncle Dan. This is really cool, Mike said. I took one more look at Carmen and went to finish my paperwork. Later, I heard everyone getting ready for bed. Soon, Molly peeked into my office, smiling and waiting for permission to enter. No one could reject this little girl, or her mom. Molly climbed into my lap, kissed me, and hugged me goodnight. Uncle Dan, see you in the morning. I owned a gas station with self-service and a small grocery store. I no longer repaired cars, but occasionally used a tow truck. Carmen called, saying her car wouldn't start again, which was frustrating. I took the tow truck to the diner to pick her up. Two guys there offered to hook up her battery, clearly hitting on her. She told them no thanks, her friend was coming. When I arrived, they backed off. I told them, thanks, but I'll take it from here, which made them nervous. They left quickly. I hooked up her car, and she climbed into the truck, showing a lot of leg as she straightened her dress. Thanks for coming, Dan. I told you I'd always be there for you. Are you upset someone else offered to help me? Yes and no. I want people to see how amazing you are, but it bothers me when they hit on you. I didn't do anything wrong, Daniel. I know. I was just answering your question. Besides, I don't own you. You told those guys I was your fiancé. Why? I didn't answer. I just drove to the junkyard. Why are we here, Dan? I'll give you a couple of $100 for that junk car. Get your personal stuff out and put it in this garbage bag. We'll sort it later. What am I supposed to drive? We'll talk later. We need to hurry to get the kids. She loaded her stuff, and we got $300 for the car. We picked up Molly's car seat and headed home. I opened the garage and told Carmen she could drive my old car. It only had 8,000 miles and was 4 years old. I bought it with insurance money after Annie's accident. I usually drove the truck, so the car was rarely used. She put Molly's car seat in and left to get the kids. When they got back, Mark said they had a new car, and it was nicer than their mom's old one. Dan, I'll pay you for the car. How much do you want? Carmen asked. Just drive it. You need something better. It's a good car. I'll keep it in my name and pay the insurance. It'll save you money. What if we don't stay together? What if I move? Are you thinking of moving? No, I was just wondering what I'd do with the car if you kicked us out. I'm sorry. I couldn't believe this was our first fight over the car. Carmen, I promise you'll always have a car. I'll put it in writing if you want. I was just worried about you in that old car. I want you safe and here with me. She kissed me, and it felt good. Molly looked at her brothers and said, Mom just kissed Uncle Dan. It was a thank you for letting us use his car. No, it's your mother's car now. She kissed me because I gave her the car. Carmen kissed me again. Okay, everyone, time to get ready for dinner. Should I cook or should Mom drive us to McDonald's in her new car? McDonald's, everyone shouted. Update. I was at the store on Friday while Carmen was at work. My kids, Brad, Janice, and Mandy, came to see me. Dad, we need to talk. Can we go to your house for a bit? They said. Sure, go home. I'll be there in a few minutes. I knew what this was about and was ready. When I got home, they were all in the living room. Dad, this is about Carmen and her kids, Brad began. Seriously, Brad, you drove 2 hours for this? What did Carmen do to make you dislike her so much? It's not that we dislike her, Janice said. One day you're helping her, and the next she's living here with her kids. Your car is gone too. Did you give it to Carmen? As my kids, I'll explain, but I'm disappointed in all of you. Dad, I think Carmen is using you, Brad said. You're lonely, and she meets your needs. You fell in love, and now her kids are taken care of. Crap, Brad, Mandy jumped in. I know Carmen better than you. She loves Dad, and he loves her. I'm here to support them. Brad, if you weren't my son, I'd knock you off your chair. What should I have done when Carmen needed help? Give her money? Ignore her? I did what I thought was right. Dad, Are you saying you've never had lovemaking with her? Janice asked. No, we haven't. Not that it's your business, and I'm thinking of asking Carmen to marry me. What? Brad said. You hardly know her. She has a lot of baggage and 3 kids. She's closer to my age than yours. You all have your own lives. I've found someone I care about who cares about me too. I have a big house to share. Why are you against it? Okay, Dad, Brad said. Let's say you love each other. Do you really want to start over raising 3 young kids? I love those 3 kids. They remind me of when you and I used to play, Brad. Molly hugs me and sits on my lap like you two did when you were little. They're great kids, and I can make a big difference in their lives. Dad, you're seeing things too positively. They're not your biological children. Do you really want to spend the next 20 years raising kids that aren't yours? What do you think, Janice? Should they be my biological kids? I don't know. I love you, and you'll always be my father. But can you raise someone else's child? I don't know, Janice. Would you have loved me if I wasn't your biological father? Would you consider me your father if I wasn't? You're my father, and it's too hypothetical. You've always been there for me, so I'd still consider you my real father. But what does that have to do with raising Carmen's kids? Hold on, I have something to show you. I brought out the DNA tests. Your mom and I kept some secrets. It might be a mistake to show you, but you need to understand. I love Carmen's kids and know I can be a good father to them. I handed them the DNA results. What is it? Janice asked. These are your DNA results, Brad and Janice. They show your siblings with the same biological parents. But Mandy's results are different, meaning only one of her parents is the same as yours. Mandy started crying. Are you saying you're not my biological father? No, Mandy, I'm not Brad's or Janice's biological father. They were all shocked. What? Brad said. You've always been my father, Janice cried. Is that why you asked about my father? You are my father, no matter what the test says. I love you, Dad. I just want you to be happy with Carmen. I'm so confused, Brad asked. Are you going to tell us about our biological father? First, Brad, know that I have always considered you and Janice my children. Nothing has changed except what you know now. You are my son, and Janice is my daughter. It's not just blood that makes a family, it's love and compassion. I planned to tell them about their biological father, but I wanted them to know I always loved them like my own. The past with their mother was over, and I didn't want them to know we were going to divorce. Your mom and I married young. Both Harvey Kittle and I loved her. Harvey also loved Mary, got her pregnant, and they married. I married your mom and was very happy. Later, your mom told me she had married Harvey, and we all stayed friends. Your mom got pregnant with you, Brad, and then Janice. After Janice was born, Harvey died, and your mom became depressed. She confessed you two were Harvey's kids. I was shocked, and we split up for a month. I missed my kids, so we talked and decided to stay together. Your mom became a wonderful wife, and I loved you both as my own. Then Mandy was born, and she was definitely mine. We lived happily until your mom's accident. Dad, why did you take the kidney test if you weren't my biological father? Brad asked. I hoped and prayed I was a match for you, Brad. You were my son, and I would have given you my kidney in a heartbeat. Did you take a match test before Brad went to the hospital? Janice asked. No, it was expensive, and your mom had already told me the truth. There were no surprises. When I took the test, I knew the results. By the way, I have the test results of all your families. Brad, you and Gail are the biological parents of your children. Janice, you and Rob are also the parents of your children. Your mom was a great mother and wife. Let's leave it at that. I'm sorry, Dad. I was thinking more about us than about you and Carmen, Brad said, starting to cry. Brad, in situations like this, people often worry about inheritance. I think you're more concerned about that than about me and Carmen. You 3 will always be in my will, each getting a fair share. I'm disappointed you haven't shown compassion for Carmen and her children. Janice hugged me, saying she didn't believe the test, and that I would always be her father. I hugged her back. Just as I started to hug Mandy, Carmen pulled up. Well, looks like we're all going out to dinner, unless you want to tell Carmen why you're here, I said. Carmen walked in. Hi, everyone. What brings you all here? Mandy thought quickly. It's my last day off from home, and we decided to go out to dinner. Great. Give me a minute to change out of my waitress uniform. Kids, talk to Mandy, Janice, and Brad while I get dressed. Molly hugged Brad. Hi, Brad. I like you. Brad looked at me, realizing what I meant. Mike asked Janice, did you bring your kids so we can play? We're learning to share our toys better. No, they're home. Maybe you can visit after Christmas, Janice replied. Can I, Uncle Dan? I've never been to their house. We'll see, Mike. It's still a couple of weeks away, I replied. Mandy asked Mark what was new. We bought a new car, and Mom kissed Uncle Dan. Everyone was looking at me, but Carmen saved the day. Yes, Mike, I kissed him twice for letting us use the car. We're using it now to go to dinner. Come on, kids, back in the car. Uncle Dan will drive, so you all sit in the back. After dinner, Brad apologized privately. I'm sorry, Dad, I shouldn't have questioned you. It's okay to wonder, Brad. It's just how you did it. If my actions bother you, let's discuss them until we understand each other. He smiled when I said father and son. Later, I talked with Janice, too. I wanted my kids to know I was always there for them. I'm still unsure if telling them was right, but it's done. Mandy asked if I could babysit so she could shop with Carmen. I gave them a list and money, asking them to store the items for me. I wanted to buy the kids bicycles since they could now ride them in a safe neighborhood. I asked Carmen if she needed money for shopping. No, I'm just buying for you and the kids for Christmas. I got $300 when my friend sold my old car. She was too proud to take more money. She wanted to give the kids nice things without spoiling them, which wasn't easy. I borrowed Carmen's car to take the kids shopping. She laughed. Just be careful and don't eat in it. I only got it a few days ago. We visited Santa and took pictures. I told the kids we were shopping for Mom for Christmas and gave each $20, explaining it was only for her gift. Keep it in your pocket and only take it out when you're ready to pay, I said. The kids initially looked at expensive things, so I took them to a kid-friendly store. The clerk helped them find items within their budget, and I asked to be notified if they needed more money. The kids worked hard to find the perfect gifts for their mom. Mike asked if I could lend him $5. Uncle Dan, Mom loves unicorns, and it costs $25. I'll give you the difference if you wash my truck. Deal! Thanks, Uncle Dan! Mike ran to buy the unicorn. Mark was looking at movies. Mark, you're supposed to be shopping for your mom. Mom likes Titanic and Shrek, but I don't have enough for both. Take them both. Here's the extra money. When Mike washes my truck, you help him. Thanks, Uncle Dan. Mom will love them. Molly couldn't find a gift she liked. None of them smell like Mom, I whispered to the saleswoman. White diamonds. Sir, it's $50. She only has $20. Tell her it's on special for $20 and I'll pay the difference. Molly, the saleswoman said, I have a bottle of perfume that smells like your mom. It's our last bottle and costs exactly $20. Molly smiled, pulled out her money, and bought it. We picked up our purchases and visited Santa again. I asked the kids to help me find a gift for Mandy. She was going to England, and I wanted to buy her new luggage. The children were eager to help, and I pretended to need their advice as we looked at the luggage section. This way, Uncle Dan. The suitcases are here. Thanks, boys. Now I need a set with 5 pieces. They found a set with 5 pieces of luggage. I want to help, Uncle Dan. What can I do? Molly asked excitedly. You can pick a color for Mandy. Molly chose a bright pink set, but it only had 3 pieces. She kept looking and found a dark blue set with 5 pieces. So we bought that one. We stopped for lunch and then went home. The kids hid their gifts for Mom in my office. They put Mandy's luggage on her bed with a Christmas card signed by all 3 kids. When Mandy got home, she saw the luggage and was thrilled. She hugged and thanked them. The next few weeks flew by with work and the kids' school activities. We decorated a Christmas tree for the first time in 3 years, making the holiday season special. Mandy went to England, and we planned to visit Janice and Brad the day after Christmas. Christmas preparations were hectic, but our evenings were wonderful. We watched Christmas programs together every night. I bought Carmen a few things, including a gift certificate and an engagement ring. I also got her a hot red nightgown. Christmas morning, the kids were excited to find presents under the tree and in their stockings. Watching them open gifts and seeing Carmen's joy was heartwarming. Carmen got her favorite movies from Mark, a unicorn from Mike, and perfume from Molly. Molly said, Mommy, that was the last bottle, and I just had enough money. Carmen smiled when she saw the $50 price tag. I got nice gifts from Carmen. She said Mandy helped her pick them out. I had hidden bikes for each child around the house, and their happiness was priceless. Molly and Mark got training wheels, but we knew Mark wouldn't use them since his older brother didn't. While the kids played, I gave Carmen a big box with hot nightgowns. Wow, what made you buy this? She asked. This comes with it, I said, handing her a small package. She cried when she saw the engagement ring, and I asked her to marry me. Why, Dan? Why? Because I love you and want you and the kids to be with me always. So, is the answer yes? Dan, the answer is no. Please hear me out. I love you, but we've only known each other for a couple of months. After the holidays, things will go back to normal. I have a proposition. Okay, I'm listening. I want to rent out our rooms and give you $200 a week. I want us to live as a family. If in 6 months you think it's not working, we'll make other arrangements. I need you to be sure and see that I truly love you. All I'm asking for is time. I'm not going anywhere until you send me away. She handed the ring back and kissed me. She asked to keep the nightgown, hinting that we should take our time and make sure marriage was what we both wanted. I could live with that, hoping it would bring us closer. The kids played with their toys all day. Despite the cold, they wanted to ride their bikes, so Carmen and I bundled up and watched them. In the afternoon, Mandy called from England to announce her engagement. We congratulated her and wished her a Merry Christmas. That evening, we watched A Christmas Story together, and the kids thanked me for the best Christmas ever before bed. Carmen took a shower, and I could smell her perfume from the hallway. She appeared at my door in her new nightgown, asking to come in. Dan, I love you, but we need to postpone the wedding until we know each other better. Can we start tonight? Will you make love to me? She smiled as she walked in, and we spent an unforgettable night together. In the morning, she was asleep with Molly. I made coffee and prepared for the day. We had breakfast and then headed to Janice's for Christmas dinner. Brad and his family were there too. We exchanged gifts, and I was touched they included Carmen and her kids. Mandy explained our tradition of not buying gifts for adults, but Brad mentioned Gail thought a sweater would look good on Carmen. Later, Brad asked if I had proposed to Carmen. I did, but she turned me down, I said. What? I can't believe it. She loves you, Dad. What happened? She thinks it's too soon. She wants to make sure we're making the right decision and wants to contribute financially. She doesn't want handouts, but a loving relationship. So we're giving it time. Wow, Dad, don't lose her. She's special. Time, Brad. We'll give it time. Life continued, and we formed a family. Carmen and I shared cooking duties and managed expenses through a joint checking account. Major purchases were discussed beforehand. Though I usually lunched at Joe's, I'd wait for Carmen to join me. We functioned like a married couple, minus the fights, enhancing everything with our love. Mandy observed our closeness, but remained silent. As Mandy's wedding neared, she asked Carmen to be her maid of honor, bringing tears of joy to Carmen's eyes. Although she considered Molly for the flower girl, she opted for one of her nieces instead. The lead-up to Mandy's wedding was busy. She had just graduated, and we were caught up in planning. My girlfriend was a bridesmaid. Fortunately, the weather allowed us to open the pool, keeping the kids occupied while Mandy and Carmen handled wedding preparations. I remained nearby. As the wedding approached, I pondered my relationship with Carmen. I adored her kids, and they adored me. I had a surprise planned for Carmen at the wedding, as we hadn't discussed marriage since Christmas. On the big day, I donned my tuxedo. Brad and Rob were in the wedding party, alongside Janice and Gail. Everyone was dressed up, and the ceremony was imminent. Carmen, as a bridesmaid, was busy. I sat with her kids in the front row, instructing them to behave. I would walk Mandy down the aisle. As the music played, Janice walked down the aisle, greeted softly by the kids. Gail followed, receiving the same greeting. When Carmen came next, the kids excitedly greeted her, prompting her to quiet them. The flower girl and ring bearer, Janice and Rob's children, followed, with the kids waving at them. As Mandy walked down the aisle with me, tears of joy filled our eyes. Molly's exclamation of, "Wow, Aunt Mandy looks like a princess," drew chuckles and a smile from Mandy. Then I took my seat. Glancing at my family, I felt immensely blessed. My daughter Janice, daughter-in-law Gail, beloved Carmen, daughter Mandy, and future son-in-law Ross. Brad and Rob stood with them, while my grandchildren played their roles. At the reception, Carmen joined me for the first dance. "I love you, Carmen," I said. "I love you too, Dan. Are you serious? Do you really want this?" she asked. "Dan, I mean it deeply," she replied, kissing me publicly for the first time. Later, it was time to toss the bouquet. Brad urged Carmen to join since she was single. Mandy threw the bouquet right to her. The garter toss followed, and Ross handed it to me, saying, "This belongs to my father-in-law." Everyone, including Carmen, was curious. She sat down, and I, on one knee, slid the garter up her leg. Reaching her hip, I pulled out a wedding ring from my pocket, still on my knees. "Carmen, after another 6 months surrounded by family and friends, I propose to you. Will you marry me?" Silence filled the room as everyone waited for her response. Then, from the crowd, Molly stepped forward. Seeing her tearful mother, she urged, "Say yes, Mommy. Dan, I love you wholeheartedly. I'll do anything to make you happy. Yes, I'll marry you. Cheers erupted. Mandy approached Carmen, and they both cried. There likely wasn't a dry eye in the place, including mine as I kissed my bride-to-be. Now happily wed, Carmen left her job at Joe's Diner to help run the gas station and convenience store. She's well-liked, making the workplace feel more family-oriented. We're considering adoption, a decision we'll make together. Molly already calls me Daddy, while the boys sometimes switch between Daddy and Uncle Dan, perhaps to confuse their friends. Reflecting on life, I wonder how knowing about Harvey Kittle or if Annie's accident hadn't happened would have changed our family's path. Life's fragility and the impact of early mistakes weigh on my mind. Snuggled with my new wife on the couch, we watch our new family play on the floor as we enjoy a love story on TV. Mark's Christmas gift, Titanic, brings us together except for Molly, who tends to doze off halfway through.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
He stood in front of me, hands raised, fists clenched, and his feet moving like a seasoned fighter. For me, it was fight or flight. I took off my cap, and for a moment he froze. Dear listeners, today we bring a story of a man cheated on by his wife with a martial artist and puts her husband in a very dangerous situation. My name is Dustin. I am a 35-year-old man. I was married to Kathy, who was 32 when we got divorced. I work as an engineer at a local company and make a decent amount of money every month. We have a 6-year-old son, Ron. I met my wife through a common friend who introduced us. We kept in touch and later started dating. After dating for about 3 years, we decided to get married. We had our honeymoon in Phuket, Thailand. At our honeymoon, my wife was staring at all the Asian men and asked me, "These guys are smaller than an average white man. They must be small, between the legs, right?" I took that as a silly question and laughed it out. Kathy was always the one into fitness. She used to regularly visit the gym and tries to stay fit. When Kathy was pregnant, I took extra care for her. I used to cook, at times feed her in bed. I tried my best to pamper her during her pregnancy, as my mother told me that I need to keep her happy for the baby to be a bright one. Once Ron was born, I knew it was time for me to start pushing myself at work as now I needed a ton of money. Once Ron was 5-year-old, Kathy started to go to the gym as she wanted to lose the fat she gained during her pregnancy. This is where my life took turn for the worst. In 2 months, Kathy had lost almost 20 pounds and I was shocked at her transformation. I used to see her get better every day, but did not realize the amount of weight that she lost was that high. I asked her what is the secret for the weight loss. She explained that she was not training martial arts and that helped her lose weight. I was inspired and decided to go back to my old gym that I used to train at. I started training and in a few months I too was getting physically better, but I was not losing weight like my wife. One day I asked my wife if I can come train with her trainer and lose some weight. She was a bit taken aback and stated that the batch was full and they are not taking any more trainees. I was a bit shocked and brushed it off and did not put a lot of thought at it. A few days later, I was leaving for home when the front desk lady asked me to wait. She told me that some guy came looking for me. I asked if that guy left a message. She said no. I asked how did he look like. She said that it was an Asian guy with a tattoo on his neck. I brushed it off as I did not know any such guy. A day later, my wife asked me if I would like to go watch a Muay Thai match. She said that she has front row pass. I was surprised and asked how did she get front row pass to a Muay Thai event. She stated that her trainer is competing. I said yes as it was an exciting event and I have never seen a Muay Thai match up close. So, here we were at the event and after 3 fights, it was her trainer's turn. It was a 150-pound fight. The fighters stepped in the ring and I noticed that both fighters had tattoos on their neck. I laughed at the coincidence, and that someone came to my office with that tattoo was funny. So, the bell rang and Kathy's trainer knocked out the opponent within 15 seconds. The fight was one-sided, and the winner was celebrating. I excused for a quick pee. I came back and from a distance I saw my wife was hugging that fighter. I was angry, and at the same time I was thinking maybe it is because that the guy is her trainer. Things like that happens among team members. While going home, I asked my wife, why did she hug the guy? She stated that it was her trainer and it was just a small hug. Not that I am sleeping with. She was angry and did not speak to me that night. At home, she stated that I ruined her mood, and she was happy that her trainer won, but I ruined that as well. I apologized and tried to sort the situation. That night, I woke up and did not find my wife my bed. I started to look for her, and I saw her in the kitchen. She had her phone on the kitchen table and was standing naked. She was on a video call with someone. I heard her say, "This is your prize for today." I walked up to the phone, picked it up, and saw that she was making a video and had not sent to anyone. Before I could check it, she said that she was making that for me. Since we had a fight, she wanted to make it up to me. I walked up to her and turned her on the kitchen table and made sure it was one of the best she ever had. Once I was done, she collapsed on the floor and was panting hard. She said, "We should do this more often." I was foolish to believe her that night. Next morning, I woke up happy and went to the gym to train. I trained hard that day. It was cold, so I was wearing a beanie cap and had a hood over my head. Once I was done, I walked out of the gym to go home. As I approached my car, I noticed a man walking towards me. He appeared to be about 170 centimeters tall, and as he got closer, I realized that he was Kathy's trainer. With a confident and almost unsettling demeanor, he stopped in front of me, looked me straight in the eye, and said something that caught me completely off guard. "I need to tell you something," he began with a smug grin. "I'm in love with your wife. Every single day, twice a day, I make love to her. I send her home carrying my seed, and I want you to know that. From now on, you are to leave her alone. Don't touch her. She's mine now." His words were sharp and deliberate, intended to provoke me, and the intensity of his gaze made it clear that he believed every word he said. It was as though he wanted to shatter my world right then and there. I was left speechless, utterly shocked by his words. My face must have shown my confusion and disbelief because, just then, two of my training partners arrived, noticing something was off. They asked what was going on, but before I could respond, the guy started throwing insults and threats my way. He demanded that I walk away from my wife, or he'd beat me up right then and there. I was still in shock, trying to process everything he was saying. I had no idea what he was talking about, or why he was so intent on confronting me like this. My training partners were closing in, ready to step in, but I gestured for them to hold back. I looked the guy in the eye and told him he needed to be clear about what he was saying and asked if he was sure he wanted to deal with me. With a cold, confident voice, he repeated, "Kathy is my love. I want her for myself." Then, with a dramatic flair, he took off his jacket, throwing it to the side, and squared up for a fight. He positioned himself directly in front of me, hands raised, fists clenched, his footwork quick and controlled like someone who knew how to handle himself in a fight. At that moment, it was a clear choice, fight or flight. I felt the adrenaline surge, and without saying a word, I calmly took off my cap. The guy froze for a second, his eyes drawn to my cauliflower ears, a badge of my years of combat training. Anyone familiar with fighting would understand that this wasn't my first time facing a challenge. But despite that warning, he shook his head and raised his fists again, ready to escalate things. You see, I'm a former high school wrestler, standing 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighing almost 260 pounds. And here's this guy, probably no more than 150 pounds, threatening me, telling me he's going to beat me up. The absurdity of it all only added to the tension, but it was clear he wasn't backing down. So, I decided to match his energy. I calmly took off my jacket and got ready, preparing myself for whatever was about to come next. This wasn't going to end with words. As soon as I took off my jacket and squared up, he wasted no time. He lunged forward and threw a punch, aiming right for my face. The hit landed, slicing open my eyebrow, and almost instantly, I felt the warm trickle of blood running down my face. It stung, but it wasn't the pain that got me. It was the audacity of this guy. He stood there, barely catching his breath, and with a cocky grin, he asked, "You want more?" Before he could even finish his sentence, I had already moved. Years of wrestling instinct kicked in, and I shot for a double leg takedown. I wrapped his legs and lifted him clean off the ground. He must have been at least 6 feet in the air before he knew what was happening. There's a sinking feeling you get when you're picked up like that, helpless, with the ground rapidly coming up to meet you. And when he hit, the impact was brutal. His body slammed into the pavement with a thud, and the sound of his breath getting knocked out of his lungs was unmistakable. He gasped, wide-eyed, like he was drowning in airless space. But I wasn't done. I could see the fear in his eyes as he struggled to regain his composure, but I gave him no time. I hoisted him back up, this time driving him down onto the hood of his own car. The sound of metal buckling beneath his body echoed through the street as the car's bonnet crumpled under the force. The impact left a deep dent, and I could hear the groaning of twisted metal as his body lay sprawled across it. For a second, I thought he might stay down, but the rage in me wasn't satisfied yet. I grabbed him again, lifted him effortlessly like a rag doll, and slammed him back down, this time even harder. The car hood caved in further, And with that final crash, he was done. His body was limp, crumpled like a piece of discarded paper, lying there motionless as the reality of what had just happened set in. He had come at me with all that bravado, but now the fight was drained out of him. Blood still dripped from my face, but I stood over him, adrenaline pumping through my veins, as he lay there broken, defeated, and realizing just how big a mistake he had made. After the fight, my friends came up to me, concerned but also supportive. They told me they had seen everything and would back me up if that guy tried to file a complaint. One of them had even recorded the whole thing on video, capturing the moment when the arrogant trainer got the beating of his life. With evidence on my side, I knew I had nothing to worry about. But deep down, I could sense that the day wasn't over yet. There were more secrets waiting to surface, ones that might be even more shocking than what had just unfolded. When I got home, I felt the weight of everything hanging over me. I poured myself a glass of water, letting the cool liquid settle me. My phone buzzed, and it was my friend, sending over the video of the fight. I watched it briefly, seeing the trainer's arrogance crumble as he hit the ground again and again, and knew I had to confront Kathy with this. I found her in the house, looking relaxed and completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I asked her to sit down with me. Trying to keep my composure, I smiled slightly and said, "I've got something to show you." I handed her my phone and hit play. At first, she smiled back, probably thinking it was just something casual or funny. But as the video played, the look on her face changed. Her smile slowly faded, replaced by shock and horror as she realized what she was watching. She saw the fight, the brutal takedown, the smashed car, and the trainer lying there like a broken doll. The reality of the situation dawned on her as she watched in stunned silence. Her eyes met mine, and I could see the panic behind them, as if she knew there was no way to explain away what had just unfolded. As soon as the video ended, Kathy's reaction was immediate. Tears streamed down her face, and she lashed out at me, shouting, "Why did you beat him up?" Her anger and hurt were palpable, but I wasn't going to let that deflect what needed to be addressed. I looked her dead in the eye and asked the question that had been burning inside me ever since the fight. "Why did you sleep with him?" The shock in her expression told me everything. She hadn't expected me to know. The room went dead silent for a moment as she struggled to find words. I pressed further, repeating exactly what her affair partner had said to me earlier. "He told me he loves you, that he sleeps with you every day, twice, and sends you home carrying his seed." At that moment, her tears turned to sobs, and she broke down, barely able to get her words out. "I was just curious," she cried. My voice rose, filled with frustration and betrayal. "Curious? For what?" She wiped her eyes, struggling to explain. "Ever since I started training with AP, I don't know, curious. Curious if Asian men are good in bed." Her confession hit me like a gut punch. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She continued, her words stumbling out between sobs. "It started with just small flirting at first. One day during training, I accidentally kicked AP in the groin. I apologized, of course, and after the session, I went to his office to say sorry again. That's when things escalated. He flirted with me, and even showed me where I had kicked him." Her face was a mess of tears, and her voice quivered as she tried to explain what happened next. "I don't know what came over me," she whispered. "One moment, I was apologizing, and the next, we were having sex. I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." The room felt heavy with the weight of her confession. I stood there, my mind spinning, trying to comprehend how things had spiraled so far out of control. The betrayal, the lies, the complete absurdity of it all. It was too much to take in at once. Kathy's confession wasn't over. Through her tears, she admitted that this affair had been going on ever since the first time. She said she loved me, and that I was her only real love. Desperately, she tried to rationalize what had happened, insisting that it was just casual sex, a physical fling with some random guy. She begged me not to think too much about it, saying that since there was no emotional attachment, just lust, it could be overlooked. I stood there, silent. Her words washed over me, but they didn't ease the pain. She was trying to make it sound like this was just a meaningless mistake, something that could be swept under the rug. But the weight of her betrayal, the deliberate choices she made, couldn't be brushed aside so easily. My mind raced, filled with anger, confusion, and disbelief. Without saying a word, I grabbed my phone and dialed her mother. Kathy watched, her eyes widening in disbelief, but she didn't try to stop me. When her mother picked up, I laid it all out, telling her everything. About the affair, the lies, and the betrayal. I could hear her mother's breath catch on the other end of the line as she started crying. Kathy exploded in anger. "Why did you tell my mother?" Her voice was shrill, full of rage and disbelief, but I stayed calm. I looked her in the eyes and with a cold, steady voice, said, "Just think of it as me telling her a casual story." That response struck her deeply, almost as if she realized the weight of her own hypocrisy in that moment. Her rage escalated, filling the room with her screaming, but I was strangely calm. It was as if a dam had broken inside me, and all the emotion I had built up was gone. I sat down, and as she kept yelling, I felt a strange silence. I could see her mouth moving, her gestures animated, but I couldn't hear a word. It was as if the world had muted around me. I just watched her, feeling detached, like I was no longer part of the chaos unraveling in front of me. After what felt like an eternity but was only a few seconds, I snapped back into reality. The sound of her voice came flooding back in, but by then, I had already made my decision. I looked her in the eyes, still calm, and said, "Get out. Talk to a lawyer and start the negotiations." My words hung in the air, final and cold. There was no more room for discussion, no more rationalizing, no more tears. She had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, and now there was only one path forward. I stood by my decision, knowing that this chapter of my life had come to an end. Kathy fell to her knees, pleading now. "Think of our son," she begged through her tears. "You'll ruin his life if we get divorced." I couldn't help but smile bitterly at her words. "That's a very valid point," I said calmly. "I wonder if you thought about our son while you were screwing that fighter." My voice was sharp, cutting through the tension. "I hope the sex was good, and I hope you treasure every memory of every climax you had with him, because soon enough, I'll be sending a formal complaint to his gym. He'll be jobless, and maybe he'll crawl back to Thailand. Or better yet, if he loves you so much, he can take you with him." The weight of my words hit her like a punch. She sobbed harder, but I was done. "Now, pack your bags and get out of my house." I didn't wait for her response. I just turned and walked away, feeling an eerie calm settle over me. As I headed toward the door, I added, "Don't wake our son. Be gone by the time I get back." With that, I left the house, not looking back at her tear-streaked face. Once outside, I called her mother again and told her everything, explaining the situation in full. "I'll be divorcing your daughter," I said, making my decision clear. There was no turning back from here. When I returned home, I saw Kathy leaving with her mother. The weight of everything hit me as I walked inside, the house now eerily quiet. I checked on my son, still peacefully asleep, completely unaware of the storm brewing around him. My heart sank. The reality of what this would mean for him, the trauma of a broken home, the uncertainty of the future, washed over me like a tidal wave. I couldn't hold back the emotion any longer. I collapsed onto the floor near his bed, curling up as tears silently streamed down my face. I cried for him, for the life we once had, and for everything that had been shattered. The next morning, I gathered myself and met with the lawyer. I laid out everything, explaining the situation in detail and sharing the video of the fight. He watched, his expression shifting between disbelief and sympathy. "This is quite something," he said, clearly surprised at how things had unfolded. But he was professional and focused. He assured me that he would do everything in his power to help secure custody of my son, knowing how much this mattered to me. Before I left, he advised me to send a formal complaint to the gym where Kathy had trained, detailing the affair and what had happened. It was another step toward closing this painful chapter and holding those involved accountable. I contacted the gym via email, and in time, they decided to fire that AP. As a result, he also lost his fight contracts with the promotions he was signed to. The video of me overpowering him spread quickly in underground circles, gaining quite a bit of attention. Since then, I haven't spoken to Kathy at all. The court awarded her custody of our child, which broke my heart. On top of that, I had to hand over the house to her as part of the alimony settlement. Now, I'm also paying monthly child support. Kathy's meddling completely turned my life upside down, emotionally and financially. I often feel the urge to leave this city and start fresh somewhere else, but I'm trapped by the need to be close to my son. I can't bear the thought of not having him in my life. At the same time, having to deal with Kathy regularly is incredibly frustrating and painful. But then something happened out of the blue. Kathy has been bringing her lover home. It's a violation of the court order. As part of the custody agreement, it was explicitly stated that neither of us was allowed to introduce romantic partners into our home life when our son is present. My son called me on one such night. I quickly contacted Child Protective Services, CPS, and reported Kathy's repeated disregard for the court's conditions. That same night when CPS arrived to assess the situation, they caught Kathy and her lover together in my home. They further launched an investigation, during which it became clear that Kathy's behavior was not in line with her obligations as a custodial parent. The investigation led to both Kathy and her lover being arrested for violating the court's custody agreement and for endangering the emotional well-being of our child. Her inability to follow the court's rules, combined with the findings from CPS, resulted in the court revoking her custody rights. With full custody of my son, life has found some stability. We live together with our 2 German shepherds, who are protective and always by our side. Things aren't always easy, but having my son and the dogs brings a sense of peace. We're starting fresh, focusing on creating a safe and loving home. Kathy spent some time in jail, and when she gets visitation with our son, it's under strict supervision. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My informant had nailed it. Ethan Caro was indeed at the hotel, sitting on the far side of the room, away from the bar. I led the way to a table nearby, ordering drinks for the 3 of us when the waitress came by. After letting a few minutes pass, I stood up and casually walked over to him, smiling as our eyes met. "Hi, I'm Jake Waverly. Are you alone tonight? I was hoping you could do me a huge favor. My 2 female colleagues love to dance, but there's only one of me, and I'm not as young as I used to be. They hate being constantly hit on by guys with ulterior motives, and you seem like the decent type. Could you help me out and join us?" He hesitated, mentioning that he was married. But as planned, Maya came up and sweetened the deal with a bit of charm. As I'd suspected, he couldn't say no to a pretty woman asking politely. He agreed and followed me back to the table, where I introduced him to Alyssa. The band started playing, and Maya wasted no time taking him out onto the dance floor. Alyssa and I followed, and after a couple of dances, the girls switched partners. "So, what do you think, Maya?" I asked. "Not the best answer, but he'll do." A little unsure of himself, but we can work on that. As you said, he's here all week for that training course. I gave him the cover story about us manning a booth at the conference center. I bought another round of drinks when we all sat down for a while. We kept it friendly and talked cars and sport. Then the girls got tappy feet again, so we went onto the floor for another half hour, having a 3rd drink when the band took a break. The ladies excused themselves to go restroom together, and I turned to Ethan. "Thanks for helping me out here. I sure appreciate it." The girls only agreed to come along and work on the stand if I made sure they got some dancing every night. They've been to exhibitions in the past where they've had 6 straight nights of sitting in their rooms doing paperwork or watching TV, and they insisted that they weren't going to do that again. "You have to travel much in your line of work?" "No, this is the first week-long trip since I got married." "That reminds me. I better call my wife and tell her I'm here and settled in at the hotel, okay?" I smiled at him. "How long have you been married?" "Just over 6 months. Word of advice from an older friend, Ethan. I know, and the girls know, that you're just being kind and neighborly dancing with them to help keep the wolves away. Your wife might not see it quite like that. Just tell her that you're having a couple of beers with the salesman you met, and then you're going to turn in." He nodded. She did seem anxious about me being away on my own, staying in a hotel for a week. She's right to be suspicious. There are a lot of people who play away when they're on business trips. You'd be surprised how many married women aren't wearing their wedding rings. Alyssa and Maya are both genuinely single, and I'm sure glad we found you for them to dance with, rather than some sleazeball sex hound with a wife and 4 kids back in Chicago. Anyway, you go make that call to your lovely wife. Can I get you another beer for when you get back? Please. He headed off for the foyer. The 2 girls returned to the table. He's gone to call Harper. You 2 going to slow dance with him tonight? Yeah, but we're not going to push it. I'd say we go for it tomorrow, then we'll have at least 4 nights. Okay by me. Beer or wine? Beer. This is thirsty work. Ethan returned 10 minutes later. The band was back, and he only had time for a swift chug at his beer before Alyssa dragged him away from the table. By 10 o'clock, he'd slow danced with both of them, and they had reported to me that he was without doubt rampantly heterosexual. They had that effect on a man. Maya and Alyssa announced that they were off to bed. They both kissed him and thanked him for the drinks and dancing and went off. I stayed chatting to him for another 10 minutes, and then pleaded preparation work for the morning and headed upstairs. He was a real nice guy. He would have made a great son-in-law. Shame about the woman he was married to. I unlocked my room and slipped the catch on the internal door to the adjoining room. Alyssa heard me and stuck her head round. "Can we join you? Be my guests." They were both dressed in bathrobes. When I got out of the shower, they were in my bed and padding the space between them. Why would I refuse the offer? When they were done with me, we cuddled and talked for a while afterwards, discussing what we would do the next day. There were plenty of places to see, and they'd done some research on what interested them. I set the alarm for 6:30, and we were showered and down for breakfast at 7:15. Ethan was already sitting at a table, so Maya asked if we could join him. He chatted away happily and said he was looking forward to our company that evening. We took a city tour bus in the morning, lunched at a pancake house, and spent the afternoon in the hotel pool and fitness center. Ethan was in the dining room when we went down for supper at 6:30. Alyssa took the chair next to him and Maya went opposite. We made up some lies about the exhibition hall and the convention. He told us about his training course. After the meal, he went up to his room to check in with his wife. We headed for the bar and the dance floor, and he joined us a quarter of an hour later. Fast forward 5 beers and some real close slow dancing, and Ethan was on seventh heaven as Alyssa rubbed herself into him. He made no objection as she took him up to their room. Maya and I had another few dances before going up to mine. Alyssa came through and woke us at 5 Tuesday morning when Ethan left her bed to go back to his room. She told us that he'd been very enthusiastic. We had breakfast with him as a quartet again. After he left for his course, Alyssa said that she'd be having a power nap after lunch. We went sightseeing again, had lunch out, and then all crashed for a couple of hours. Maya took Ethan up to her room straight after we'd eaten supper. Alyssa and I danced a bit until she joined them an hour later, and I had a quiet night reading in my room, apart from the passionate noises still audible through the closed connecting door. Wednesday morning, I was already at the breakfast table when a freshly showered Ethan joined me, closely followed by the 2 women. He looked pretty good considering he'd had such a hard night. Maya and Alyssa were just grinning. There was more sightseeing and window shopping during the day, and a lazy afternoon around the pool. After we ate, just as soon as Ethan had gotten his evening call to Harper out of the way, we made up a foursome in my room. It was the first time that I'd had sex since before I'd confronted Lana and ended our marriage, so about 5 years. I had a great time. The girls were out to impress, and I was really glad of my little blue pill. Alyssa still had the energy left to ride Ethan in the morning, and we even made it to breakfast on time. Thursday and Friday were pretty much the same. I gave the girls some cash for a bit of shopping, reminding them that they'd have to carry whatever they bought in their luggage, and I wandered around the City Art Gallery and Museum to use up the time. Ethan wasn't flying back until Saturday morning. His company was too tight to pay the Friday evening higher fares. I even gave him one of my blue pills when he was slowing down. Once that took effect, he was the Duracell bunny. We all wished him well when he staggered off after breakfast. He'd learned a whole lot about women that week. I guess that Harper would feel the benefit of a more experienced partner, but we did advise him not to try too many new moves at once, so she wouldn't get suspicious as to where he'd learned a trick or two. Once he'd left for the airport, I went down to collect my other bag from the hotel safe. I paid Alyssa and Maya the remaining $5,000 each in cash that I'd promised them and handed over the plane tickets to Atlanta to start their lives afresh. Then I gave them their shots and talked them through being sure to take the whole course of antibiotics which would complete the cure. I did say to get themselves checked out as being clear of STIs and to do better on using condoms in future. They both intended to get proper jobs and leave the sex industry behind. I'd written each of them a recommendation to help them. They were decent girls who'd been led astray down the wrong path and discovered that it didn't pay very much at their end of the market. I prayed that their new starts would work. The cushion of money I'd given them would keep them off the streets and give them that chance to get jobs. They both kissed me real affectionately as we parted at the airport. I'd almost considered keeping one or both of them, but they were way too young for me. It just wouldn't have worked out. It was a shame. They really did know their way around a man, and they were great company too. When I got home to my small apartment in Cincinnati that afternoon, I gave myself my own shot and swallowed the first capsule of the course. After all, even having religiously used condoms when the girls and I had been alone, Wednesday through Friday nights, I'd had nearly as much chance of having gotten infected as Ethan. He wouldn't show any symptoms for at least a few days, but by then he should have passed it on to Harper. So, what do I have against Harper? Quite simple. 5 years ago, my loving wife was having an affair with a work colleague, screwing him on our marital bed on Saturday mornings while I was out taking our 15-year-old daughter to her tennis class, then to the mall, then to lunch at the food court. The recordings from my house later showed that Harper not only knew what her mother was doing while we were out, she had actually suggested to her mom that she could keep me out of the way and that it would be safer if I was with her, so I wouldn't come home early and catch Lana with her lover. At least I'd had suspicions and was able to make some preparations before Lana could react to being found out. Lana and Harper got the McMansion in the divorce. It was too bad that I'd recently taken out a $500,000 loan against the equity to buy into the medical partnership and finance an addition and some pricey diagnostic equipment we needed. Of course, when I ended up getting 30 days in jail for assaulting Lana's lover in my own bedroom, my three partners invoked the moral turpitude clause I'd had them put in the agreement and terminated me with cause, so the money was lost, gone way beyond her reach. Her lawyer was real pissed that he couldn't get that loan document overturned, but we'd had it notarized and registered, and he couldn't do anything. When I got my license back again, I started working for the city as a salaried doctor in the public health department, earning enough for a single guy, but not enough for any great alimony demand. That upset him too. I couldn't afford to pay his fees in one go either, so he took a hit there. My lawyer said he got real pleasure out of telling the other guy that I'd paid him up front. The assault got me something else in the way of revenge as well. The lover's wife found out exactly why I'd blackened his eye and bruised his nuts. Using his own cell, I'd called her and told her before the police arrived. She took him to the cleaners in their divorce, and he blamed Lana for my finding out. When I'd done my time, and my attorney and a police officer walked me round what had been our home so that I could collect my personal belongings, Lana had already thrown out all the photographs that included me in them. I guess that meant she didn't want to reconcile, and I took our depleted wedding and new baby albums as consolation, filing them in the first dumpster I passed on the way to my new lodging. It had been bad enough knowing that my wife was being unfaithful. Discovering that our daughter was aiding and abetting my betrayal nearly tipped me over the edge. For years, I'd worked extra hours to buy my two women whatever they wanted. Harper had always been given everything she ever asked for. She had rewarded my fatherly love and devotion with treachery. Paying child support for the little brat for the next 2.5 years had stung my pride, which is why when my lawyer asked about visitation, I told him I didn't want to see her again. As far as I was concerned, she was no longer related to me, although I was determined that one day she would get to appreciate for herself the pain of having your spouse cheat on you. Harper and Lana had fallen out when they had to sell the house before it got foreclosed, and suddenly there was no spare money. Harper's standard of living suddenly dropped 90 points. Daddy's credit cards had been canceled, so couldn't be taken shopping at the mall. The tennis class was history. Lana's leased Lexus had to go back. Harper didn't get a car when she reached 16. She did quickly work out that if her mother hadn't cheated on me, then she'd have kept her comfortable lifestyle. Naturally, she plumb forgot her part in helping her mother to cheat on me. They weren't such bosom buddies after that. It had been no surprise to me that Harper had pretty much accepted the first guy with a job who asked her to marry him. His name was Ethan Caro. No, I'd never met him. I wouldn't have accepted an invitation to Harper's wedding, even if I'd been on her guest list. I did send a friend to take some photographs, though, so I'd know him even if he didn't know me. Now I'd spent some time with the guy. I found I liked him. He was far too good for my daughter, though. I felt no guilt at trying to sabotage their marriage. There was no guarantee that Ethan would continue to seek other female company whenever he got the chance, but we'd certainly given him a great taste of what was available away from home, and I was sure that I'd planted a seed in fertile ground, so he'd be looking for opportunities. With only a modicum of luck, the multiple exposures to Alyssa's gonorrhea and Maya's chlamydia would have been more than enough to ensure that he already had some special souvenir gift to pass on to his wife. I'd have one of my public health contacts make sure that Ethan got some treatment at the end of the week, hopefully a booster shot from the nurse at his work, without him ever discovering that he was infected. I just hoped that I'd be on duty at the STI clinic the day Harper came in to be tested. That would be the icing on the cake for me, making it out to be her fault, demanding the details of all her sexual partners, and sending the letters to them and their spouses. Ethan, of course, would get one of the first letters, test negative, guess who signs the test reports, and have a slam-dunk no alimony divorce. Why was I so convinced that Harper was already cheating on Ethan? I had no evidence yet, but I strongly suspected it was going to be a case of like mother, like daughter. Her behavior at her bachelorette party showed very well that, with a week to go until her wedding day, she hadn't yet forsaken all others. Harper knew from her mother how easy it was to take a lover. Too bad if she didn't yet fully appreciate the downside. That reminded me, I needed to make sure I sent Ethan's divorce lawyer the photos and tapes at the appropriate time. Was it all going to be worth nearly 20 grand of the money I'd hidden in the divorce? If it worked, hell yes. Besides, my 3 ex-partners would each continue to hand over $1,000 a month in cash until I'd received back from them all $500,000 of my interest-free loan. That was the unwritten deal we'd shaken on when I found out about Lana. Okay, at only $36,000 a year, I was going to be another 13 years older by the time the debt was repaid. But I wasn't exactly hurting for money, and what else would I do with it? I hope that by giving Alyssa and Maya their new starts in life, I've done a good deed or two. Come to think of it, one of my receptionists is a young widow with a small daughter, and I just might set her up a date with Ethan once he's free again. Now, how to get some more revenge on Lana and her lover. Those are projects for the coming winter. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
When I first met her, it was at the ranch. She was out there, working with the animals, herding cattle, fixing the fences, and handling things like she had done it her whole life. I remember seeing her standing there in the dust, pulling on a rope, her face set with a determined expression. She wasn't just working, she was in her element. That's what drew me in, the way she handled everything without a complaint, with a steady, sure hand. She knew her place, and she owned it. That's the kind of woman she was, and that was enough for me. I joined her at the ranch more and more often after that. It wasn't about getting to know her better over coffee or sitting around talking about dreams and ambitions. No, it was about being there with her, in her world, seeing what mattered to her. I'd spend my evenings after my own job, out there, just to help. Not that she needed it, she could handle everything herself, but I liked to be there. The work was tough, no doubt about it, but that was how things were done. She didn't complain, and neither did I. She was passionate about the animals, especially the cattle and horses. She treated them with the same kind of respect most people reserved for family. I remember the long days where she'd be out, checking on the herd, making sure every animal was accounted for and taken care of. I knew better than to ask her to slow down or take a break, it would have been pointless. She had her priorities, and I had mine. She loved those animals, and her dedication was clear in everything she did. It was something I couldn't help but respect. When she first started talking about getting a new bull, I didn't think much of it. It was part of ranch life, you needed new blood to keep the herd strong. She was meticulous about it, though. She researched and planned for weeks, looking for the right one, visiting different ranches to find the perfect fit. I didn't get involved much. That was her domain. My job was just to be there when she needed another pair of hands. I never questioned her judgment, she knew what she was doing better than anyone else. I noticed her spending more and more time at the ranch as the weeks went by. She stayed out later, working on getting things ready for the new bull, making sure the pens were set up and everything was in order. I didn't say much. I wasn't the type to tell someone how to do their job, and she wasn't the type to be told. But it was clear that her focus was shifting more and more towards that new addition to the ranch. I figured it was just the way she was. When she took on something, she gave it everything she had. I remember the day the new bull finally arrived. She was out there, waiting by the gate, eyes fixed on the trailer as it pulled up. There was a sense of excitement in the air, a kind of tension that you could feel. She handled everything herself, directing the men who were helping, making sure the bull was safely brought into the pen. I watched from a distance, letting her do her thing. This was her show, and I was just there to support her. The bull was a big, strong animal, exactly what she'd been looking for, and she looked satisfied as she stood there, watching it settle in. After that, her routine changed. She was spending every moment she could with that bull, making sure it was healthy, well-fed, and adjusting to its new environment. It was as if the rest of the ranch didn't matter as much anymore. I'd come by after work, and she'd be out there, talking to the animal, keeping an eye on it. I didn't get it, not completely. To me, a bull was just another part of the herd, but to her, this one was different. I could see that much, even if I didn't fully understand why. There was one night I remember in particular. She was out late, much later than usual, and I decided to go check on her. I found her in the pen, standing there, just watching the bull. She didn't say much when I approached, just gave me a nod and turned back to the animal. It wasn't like her to be so quiet, but I didn't push it. She had her reasons, and I wasn't about to start questioning them. I just stood there for a while, watching her watch the bull, feeling like there was something shifting, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. After a while, I started to notice something wasn't right. She was coming home later and later, her mind somewhere else even when she was with me. When I asked her what was going on, she always gave me the same answer, just work, nothing more. But the way she acted, the way she avoided looking me in the eyes, told me that wasn't the full story. I knew her too well to believe that everything was fine. One evening, after another late night at the ranch, I decided I needed some answers. I wasn't the type to sit around and hope things would magically fix themselves. If something was wrong, I needed to know. That's when I thought about calling her friend, the one who worked with her at the ranch. She'd know what was really going on. Maybe she could tell me why my wife was acting so strange. I called her friend when my wife was still out at the ranch. She answered, sounding cheerful, but her tone changed as soon as I started asking questions. I kept it straightforward, asked if there was something going on at the ranch that I should know about. She hesitated, and then said everything was normal, nothing out of the ordinary. I could tell she was holding something back. I pressed her a bit, asked why my wife was staying late so often. She paused for a moment before saying that my wife was choosing to stay late, that it wasn't because of work. She made it clear that it was my wife's decision, not something that was required. That answer hit me like a punch to the gut. If it wasn't work keeping her there, then what was it? I thanked her and hung up, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my chest. My wife was staying late at the ranch, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. It didn't make any sense. I tried to come up with reasons. Maybe she just needed more time with the new bull, maybe there was something she wasn't telling me. But none of it added up. Not with the way she had been acting. That conversation with her friend left me with more questions than answers. I trusted her friend to tell me the truth, and she had no reason to lie. If my wife was staying late by her own choice, there had to be a reason for it. And it wasn't just about work. I knew that much. Something was going on, and I needed to find out what it was. I wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't ignore what was right in front of me. My wife was drifting away, and I had no idea why. I wanted to confront her, to ask her outright what was going on, but I also didn't want to push her further away. So, I waited, watched, and hoped that I was wrong. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. After that, things felt different. The late nights continued, the distance between us grew, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening, it wasn't good. I had to do something about it, and soon. I wasn't going to sit back and let my marriage fall apart without a fight. It was late, the kind of late where everything is quiet, and the only sound is the ticking of the clock on the wall. She was asleep, finally home after another long day at the ranch. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I had too many questions and not a single answer. I needed to know what was going on, and I wasn't getting anything from talking to her. So, I made up my mind. I had to check her phone. I wasn't proud of it, but I was desperate. I waited until her breathing was deep and steady, a sign that she was sound asleep. Slowly, I reached for her phone on the nightstand, careful not to make any noise. My heart was pounding in my chest as I unlocked it. I knew her passcode. We never kept secrets like that, or at least, we never used to. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find, but I hoped it would give me some clue, something to explain why she was acting so distant lately. I went through her messages first, scrolling through conversations with friends and co-workers. There was nothing unusual there, just the usual banter and talk about work. I checked her call log, but again, nothing stood out. It was all familiar names, people I knew she talked to regularly. I moved on to her social media apps, but there was nothing suspicious there either. Just pictures of the ranch, posts about the animals, the kind of things she always shared. The more I looked, the more frustrated I became. There was nothing. No secret messages, no strange calls, nothing that would explain why she was staying out so late or why she seemed so distant. I even checked her emails, going through each one carefully, but it was all the same. Work updates, newsletters, nothing out of the ordinary. It didn't make sense. If there was nothing going on, then why was she acting like this? Why was she pulling away from me? I put her phone back on the nightstand, making sure it was exactly where it had been. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling again, feeling more lost than ever. I had hoped that finding something, anything, would give me some direction, some idea of what I was dealing with. But there was nothing. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. I felt a knot of frustration tightening in my chest. I hated this feeling, this sense of helplessness. I turned my attention to her laptop next. It was in the living room, and I quietly got out of bed, careful not to wake her. I made my way to the living room, the floorboards creaking under my weight. I opened the laptop, the screen glowing softly in the dark. I went through her browsing history, her emails, anything I could think of. But, just like with her phone, there was nothing. No clues, no secrets, nothing that would explain what was happening. The more I searched, the more desperate I felt. I wanted there to be something, even if it was bad. At least then I'd know what I was dealing with. But there was nothing, just the same old routines, the same old habits. It was like she was living two lives, one that was perfectly normal, and another that I couldn't see, couldn't reach. And that terrified me. I closed the laptop and sat there for a moment, the silence of the house pressing down on me. I went back to bed, slipping under the covers as quietly as I could. She was still asleep, her face peaceful in the dim light. I wanted to reach out to her, to shake her awake and demand answers. But I didn't. I just lay there, feeling the weight of everything I didn't know pressing down on me. I was no closer to understanding what was going on, and the more I searched for answers, the further away they seemed. I hated this feeling, the uncertainty, the fear that I was losing her and there was nothing I could do about it. As I lay there, I realized that I was out of options. I had tried talking to her, tried finding answers on my own, but none of it had worked. I didn't know what else to do. All I knew was that something was wrong, and it was tearing us apart. I closed my eyes, hoping that sleep would come, but knowing that the questions would still be there waiting for me in the morning. Talking to her friend before hadn't given me the clarity I was looking for, but maybe I could take it a step further. I had to know what was going on at that ranch after hours, and I knew her friend was my best shot at finding out. One evening, when my wife was still out at the ranch, I decided to make the call. This time, I wasn't going to beat around the bush. I needed her friend to help me, and I was ready to do whatever it took to make that happen. She answered after a few rings, and I got straight to the point. I told her that I needed her help, that I needed to know what my wife was doing at the ranch after everyone else had gone home. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could tell she was hesitant. She wasn't the kind of person who liked getting involved in other people's business, and I understood that. But this was different. I needed answers, and I was willing to pay for them. I told her that I'd make it worth her while, that I'd pay her if she could get me some proof, some kind of evidence of what my wife was doing out there. I could hear the uncertainty in her voice as she asked me if I was sure about this. I didn't hesitate. I told her I was sure. I was tired of wondering, tired of feeling like I was losing my wife without even knowing why. She went quiet again, and I could hear her take a deep breath. Then, she agreed. She said she would help me, that she'd find a way to get some footage of what my wife was doing after hours. She told me it might take some time, that I needed to be patient, but she'd do it. I thanked her, feeling a mix of relief and dread at what I was asking her to do. After hanging up, I sat there for a moment, trying to process what I had just done. I had crossed a line, and I knew it. This wasn't just about checking a phone or a laptop, this was about spying on my wife, involving someone else in something deeply personal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was necessary. I needed to know the truth, no matter what it was. The waiting was the hardest part. I had no idea how long it would take for her friend to get the footage, and every day that passed felt like an eternity. I tried to act normal around my wife, to pretend like nothing had changed, but it was hard. Every time she left for the ranch, I felt a knot tighten in my chest, knowing that soon I might have the answers I was looking for. I watched her closely, looking for any sign that she suspected something, but she seemed oblivious. She just went about her routine, the same as always, while I waited for the truth to come out. Days turned into weeks, and I heard nothing from her friend. I started to wonder if she had changed her mind, if maybe she had decided it wasn't worth the trouble. But then, one evening, I got a message. It was short, just a few words: "I've got something. Be ready." My heart pounded as I read it, a mix of anticipation and fear washing over me. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. I didn't know what she had found, but I knew it was going to change everything. I sat there, staring at the message, my mind racing with possibilities. I had wanted answers, and now they were finally within reach. But a part of me couldn't help but wonder if I was really ready for what I was about to see. There was no turning back now. I had taken a step that couldn't be undone, and whatever came next, I would have to face it head on. I opened it, and there was a video attached. My stomach twisted as I tapped on the screen, the image coming to life before my eyes. I saw my wife, out at the ranch, but what I saw made my blood run cold. She was there, walking around the bull pen, wearing nothing but red lingerie. I could barely believe what I was seeing. She was touching the bull, running her hands over it, pressing herself against it. It was so bizarre, so wrong, that for a moment I thought there had to be some mistake. I watched, feeling my chest tighten, my heart pounding in my ears. What the hell was she doing? The scene played out in front of me, and I felt a mix of confusion and disgust. This wasn't just strange, it was sickening. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I needed to see it, to understand just how far things had gone. As I continued watching, it only got worse. She wasn't just touching the bull, she was doing something else, something vile and unimaginable. My jaw clenched, and I felt rage boiling inside me. There was no way to rationalize this, no explanation that could make this right. My hand shook as I put my phone down. I could feel my pulse in my temples, the anger building to a point where I couldn't contain it anymore. All this time, I had been wondering, searching for answers, and now I had them. The truth was far worse than anything I could have imagined. She had betrayed me in a way that went beyond anything I thought possible. I didn't want to hear her excuses, didn't want to see her face or listen to whatever lies she might come up with to justify what I had just seen. I got up, my mind set on one thing: I needed her out. I walked to the bedroom, the anger driving my every step. I opened the closet, grabbing her clothes, her shoes, everything that was hers. I yanked them off the hangers, throwing them into a pile. I moved through the house like a man possessed, gathering her things, not caring if I made a mess or if anything got damaged. She didn't deserve my consideration, not after what she had done. I felt a strange sense of clarity as I worked, like this was the only thing I could do to take control of the situation. When I first met her, it was at the ranch. She was out there, working with the animals, herding cattle, fixing the fences, and handling things like she had done it her whole life. I remember seeing her standing there in the dust, pulling on a rope, her face set with a determined expression. She wasn't just working, she was in her element. That's what drew me in, the way she handled everything without a complaint, with a steady, sure hand. She knew her place, and she owned it. That's the kind of woman she was, and that was enough for me. I joined her at the ranch more and more often after that. It wasn't about getting to know her better over coffee or sitting around talking about dreams and ambitions. No, it was about being there with her, in her world, seeing what mattered to her. I'd spend my evenings after my own job, out there, just to help. Not that she needed it, she could handle everything herself, but I liked to be there. The work was tough, no doubt about it, but that was how things were done. She didn't complain, and neither did I. She was passionate about the animals, especially the cattle and horses. She treated them with the same kind of respect most people reserved for family. I remember the long days where she'd be out, checking on the herd, making sure every animal was accounted for and taken care of. I knew better than to ask her to slow down or take a break, it would have been pointless. She had her priorities, and I had mine. She loved those animals, and her dedication was clear in everything she did. It was something I couldn't help but respect. When she first started talking about getting a new bull, I didn't think much of it. It was part of ranch life, you needed new blood to keep the herd strong. She was meticulous about it, though. She researched and planned for weeks, looking for the right one, visiting different ranches to find the perfect fit. I didn't get involved much. That was her domain. My job was just to be there when she needed another pair of hands. I never questioned her judgment, she knew what she was doing better than anyone else. I noticed her spending more and more time at the ranch as the weeks went by. She stayed out later, working on getting things ready for the new bull, making sure the pens were set up and everything was in order. I didn't say much. I wasn't the type to tell someone how to do their job, and she wasn't the type to be told. But it was clear that her focus was shifting more and more towards that new addition to the ranch. I figured it was just the way she was. When she took on something, she gave it everything she had. I remember the day the new bull finally arrived. She was out there, waiting by the gate, eyes fixed on the trailer as it pulled up. There was a sense of excitement in the air, a kind of tension that you could feel. She handled everything herself, directing the men who were helping, making sure the bull was safely brought into the pen. I watched from a distance, letting her do her thing. This was her show, and I was just there to support her. The bull was a big, strong animal, exactly what she'd been looking for, and she looked satisfied as she stood there, watching it settle in. After that, her routine changed. She was spending every moment she could with that bull, making sure it was healthy, well-fed, and adjusting to its new environment. It was as if the rest of the ranch didn't matter as much anymore. I'd come by after work, and she'd be out there, talking to the animal, keeping an eye on it. I didn't get it, not completely. To me, a bull was just another part of the herd, but to her, this one was different. I could see that much, even if I didn't fully understand why. There was one night I remember in particular. She was out late, much later than usual, and I decided to go check on her. I found her in the pen, standing there, just watching the bull. She didn't say much when I approached, just gave me a nod and turned back to the animal. It wasn't like her to be so quiet, but I didn't push it. She had her reasons, and I wasn't about to start questioning them. I just stood there for a while, watching her watch the bull, feeling like there was something shifting, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. After a while, I started to notice something wasn't right. She was coming home later and later, her mind somewhere else even when she was with me. When I asked her what was going on, she always gave me the same answer, just work, nothing more. But the way she acted, the way she avoided looking me in the eyes, told me that wasn't the full story. I knew her too well to believe that everything was fine. One evening, after another late night at the ranch, I decided I needed some answers. I wasn't the type to sit around and hope things would magically fix themselves. If something was wrong, I needed to know. That's when I thought about calling her friend, the one who worked with her at the ranch. She'd know what was really going on. Maybe she could tell me why my wife was acting so strange. I called her friend when my wife was still out at the ranch. She answered, sounding cheerful, but her tone changed as soon as I started asking questions. I kept it straightforward, asked if there was something going on at the ranch that I should know about. She hesitated, and then said everything was normal, nothing out of the ordinary. I could tell she was holding something back. I pressed her a bit, asked why my wife was staying late so often. She paused for a moment before saying that my wife was choosing to stay late, that it wasn't because of work. She made it clear that it was my wife's decision, not something that was required. That answer hit me like a punch to the gut. If it wasn't work keeping her there, then what was it? I thanked her and hung up, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my chest. My wife was staying late at the ranch, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. It didn't make any sense. I tried to come up with reasons. Maybe she just needed more time with the new bull, maybe there was something she wasn't telling me. But none of it added up. Not with the way she had been acting. That conversation with her friend left me with more questions than answers. I trusted her friend to tell me the truth, and she had no reason to lie. If my wife was staying late by her own choice, there had to be a reason for it. And it wasn't just about work. I knew that much. Something was going on, and I needed to find out what it was. I wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't ignore what was right in front of me. My wife was drifting away, and I had no idea why. I wanted to confront her, to ask her outright what was going on, but I also didn't want to push her further away. So, I waited, watched, and hoped that I was wrong. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. After that, things felt different. The late nights continued, the distance between us grew, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening, it wasn't good. I had to do something about it, and soon. I wasn't going to sit back and let my marriage fall apart without a fight. It was late, the kind of late where everything is quiet, and the only sound is the ticking of the clock on the wall. She was asleep, finally home after another long day at the ranch. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I had too many questions and not a single answer. I needed to know what was going on, and I wasn't getting anything from talking to her. So, I made up my mind. I had to check her phone. I wasn't proud of it, but I was desperate. I waited until her breathing was deep and steady, a sign that she was sound asleep. Slowly, I reached for her phone on the nightstand, careful not to make any noise. My heart was pounding in my chest as I unlocked it. I knew her passcode. We never kept secrets like that, or at least, we never used to. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find, but I hoped it would give me some clue, something to explain why she was acting so distant lately. I went through her messages first, scrolling through conversations with friends and co-workers. There was nothing unusual there, just the usual banter and talk about work. I checked her call log, but again, nothing stood out. It was all familiar names, people I knew she talked to regularly. I moved on to her social media apps, but there was nothing suspicious there either. Just pictures of the ranch, posts about the animals, the kind of things she always shared. The more I looked, the more frustrated I became. There was nothing. No secret messages, no strange calls, nothing that would explain why she was staying out so late or why she seemed so distant. I even checked her emails, going through each one carefully, but it was all the same. Work updates, newsletters, nothing out of the ordinary. It didn't make sense. If there was nothing going on, then why was she acting like this? Why was she pulling away from me? I put her phone back on the nightstand, making sure it was exactly where it had been. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling again, feeling more lost than ever. I had hoped that finding something, anything, would give me some direction, some idea of what I was dealing with. But there was nothing. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. I felt a knot of frustration tightening in my chest. I hated this feeling, this sense of helplessness. I turned my attention to her laptop next. It was in the living room, and I quietly got out of bed, careful not to wake her. I made my way to the living room, the floorboards creaking under my weight. I opened the laptop, the screen glowing softly in the dark. I went through her browsing history, her emails, anything I could think of. But, just like with her phone, there was nothing. No clues, no secrets, nothing that would explain what was happening. The more I searched, the more desperate I felt. I wanted there to be something, even if it was bad. At least then I'd know what I was dealing with. But there was nothing, just the same old routines, the same old habits. It was like she was living two lives, one that was perfectly normal, and another that I couldn't see, couldn't reach. And that terrified me. I closed the laptop and sat there for a moment, the silence of the house pressing down on me. I went back to bed, slipping under the covers as quietly as I could. She was still asleep, her face peaceful in the dim light. I wanted to reach out to her, to shake her awake and demand answers. But I didn't. I just lay there, feeling the weight of everything I didn't know pressing down on me. I was no closer to understanding what was going on, and the more I searched for answers, the further away they seemed. I hated this feeling, the uncertainty, the fear that I was losing her and there was nothing I could do about it. As I lay there, I realized that I was out of options. I had tried talking to her, tried finding answers on my own, but none of it had worked. I didn't know what else to do. All I knew was that something was wrong, and it was tearing us apart. I closed my eyes, hoping that sleep would come, but knowing that the questions would still be there waiting for me in the morning. Talking to her friend before hadn't given me the clarity I was looking for, but maybe I could take it a step further. I had to know what was going on at that ranch after hours, and I knew her friend was my best shot at finding out. One evening, when my wife was still out at the ranch, I decided to make the call. This time, I wasn't going to beat around the bush. I needed her friend to help me, and I was ready to do whatever it took to make that happen. She answered after a few rings, and I got straight to the point. I told her that I needed her help, that I needed to know what my wife was doing at the ranch after everyone else had gone home. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could tell she was hesitant. She wasn't the kind of person who liked getting involved in other people's business, and I understood that. But this was different. I needed answers, and I was willing to pay for them. I told her that I'd make it worth her while, that I'd pay her if she could get me some proof, some kind of evidence of what my wife was doing out there. I could hear the uncertainty in her voice as she asked me if I was sure about this. I didn't hesitate. I told her I was sure. I was tired of wondering, tired of feeling like I was losing my wife without even knowing why. She went quiet again, and I could hear her take a deep breath. Then, she agreed. She said she would help me, that she'd find a way to get some footage of what my wife was doing after hours. She told me it might take some time, that I needed to be patient, but she'd do it. I thanked her, feeling a mix of relief and dread at what I was asking her to do. After hanging up, I sat there for a moment, trying to process what I had just done. I had crossed a line, and I knew it. This wasn't just about checking a phone or a laptop, this was about spying on my wife, involving someone else in something deeply personal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was necessary. I needed to know the truth, no matter what it was. The waiting was the hardest part. I had no idea how long it would take for her friend to get the footage, and every day that passed felt like an eternity. I tried to act normal around my wife, to pretend like nothing had changed, but it was hard. Every time she left for the ranch, I felt a knot tighten in my chest, knowing that soon I might have the answers I was looking for. I watched her closely, looking for any sign that she suspected something, but she seemed oblivious. She just went about her routine, the same as always, while I waited for the truth to come out. Days turned into weeks, and I heard nothing from her friend. I started to wonder if she had changed her mind, if maybe she had decided it wasn't worth the trouble. But then, one evening, I got a message. It was short, just a few words, "I've got something. Be ready." My heart pounded as I read it, a mix of anticipation and fear washing over me. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. I didn't know what she had found, but I knew it was going to change everything. I sat there, staring at the message, my mind racing with possibilities. I had wanted answers, and now they were finally within reach. But a part of me couldn't help but wonder if I was really ready for what I was about to see. There was no turning back now. I had taken a step that couldn't be undone, and whatever came next, I would have to face it head on. I opened it, and there was a video attached. My stomach twisted as I tapped on the screen, the image coming to life before my eyes. I saw my wife, out at the ranch, but what I saw made my blood run cold. She was there, walking around the bull pen, wearing nothing but red lingerie. I could barely believe what I was seeing. She was touching the bull, running her hands over it, pressing herself against it. It was so bizarre, so wrong, that for a moment I thought there had to be some mistake. I watched, feeling my chest tighten, my heart pounding in my ears. What the hell was she doing? The scene played out in front of me, and I felt a mix of confusion and disgust. This wasn't just strange, it was sickening. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I needed to see it, to understand just how far things had gone. As I continued watching, it only got worse. She wasn't just touching the bull, she was doing something else, something vile and unimaginable. My jaw clenched, and I felt rage boiling inside me. There was no way to rationalize this, no explanation that could make this right. My hands shook as I put my phone down. I could feel my pulse in my temples, the anger building to a point where I couldn't contain it anymore. All this time, I had been wondering, searching for answers, and now I had them. The truth was far worse than anything I could have imagined. She had betrayed me in a way that went beyond anything I thought possible. I didn't want to hear her excuses, didn't want to see her face or listen to whatever lies she might come up with to justify what I had just seen. I got up, my mind set on one thing: I needed her out. I walked to the bedroom, the anger driving my every step. I opened the closet, grabbing her clothes, her shoes, everything that was hers. I yanked them off the hangers, throwing them into a pile. I moved through the house like a man possessed, gathering her things, not caring if I made a mess or if anything got damaged. She didn't deserve my consideration, not after what she had done. I felt a strange sense of clarity as I worked, like this was the only thing I could do to take control of the situation. Once I had everything, I carried it all outside. The night air was cold, but I barely felt it. I dumped her things on the lawn, the pile growing larger with each trip. I wanted her to see it, to understand that she was no longer welcome here. This was no longer her home. She had made her choice, and now she would face the consequences. I didn't care what the neighbors might think if they saw. Let them see. Let everyone know what kind of person she really was. I was done protecting her, done pretending that everything was fine. When I was finished, I stood there for a moment, looking at the pile of her belongings scattered across the yard. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, yes, but also pain, a deep, aching pain that settled in my chest. I had loved her. I had trusted her. And she had thrown it all away for something so twisted, so beyond comprehension. I clenched my fists, trying to push the pain away, focusing instead on the anger, the betrayal. That was easier to deal with. That gave me a purpose, a reason to keep moving. I walked back inside, slamming the door behind me. The house felt different now, empty in a way it hadn't before. I looked around, feeling the weight of what had just happened settling in. There was no going back from this. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and I was done. I had given her everything, and she had thrown it away. I wasn't going to let her back in, wasn't going to let her explain or try to make things right. There was no making this right. As I stood there, the reality of it all hit me. This was the end. The life we had built together, the future I had imagined, it was all gone. But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let her destroy me. I had made my decision, and I was going to see it through. It was late when she finally came home. I had been waiting, sitting in the living room, my jaw clenched, my eyes fixed on the front door. I heard the sound of her car pulling up, the crunch of gravel under her tires. My heart pounded, a mix of anger and something else, something I didn't want to acknowledge. I stayed where I was, my expression hard, as I heard her footsteps approaching the door. She opened it, stepping inside, and immediately noticed her things scattered across the lawn. Her face twisted in confusion, and she turned towards me, her eyes wide with questions. She stepped into the living room, her gaze darting between me and the window that looked out at her belongings. "What is going on?" she asked, her voice uncertain, a hint of fear creeping in. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, taking in the sight of the woman I thought I knew, the woman who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. Finally, I spoke, my voice cold and steady. "I know everything. I saw the video." Her eyes widened, her face going pale as my words sank in. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off before she could start. "Don't," I said, my voice sharp, my eyes locked on hers. "I don't want to hear your excuses. I don't want to hear anything from you." She stared at me, her mouth still open, her eyes filling with tears. You betrayed me, I continued, my voice growing louder, the anger I had been holding back starting to spill over. You betrayed everything we had, everything we built together. And for what? For some twisted obsession? I could see her starting to crumble, her shoulders slumping, her hands shaking as she tried to find the words to respond. She broke down then, the tears streaming down her face, her voice cracking as she tried to speak. It's not like that, she sobbed, her hands reaching out towards me, pleading. You don't understand. It's not what you think. I took a step back, my eyes narrowing as I looked at her. Don't touch me, I said, my voice like ice. There's nothing you can say that will make this right. Nothing. She fell to her knees, her hands covering her face as she cried, her sobs filling the room. But her tears meant nothing to me. I had already made up my mind. She looked up at me, her face red and wet with tears, and her expression shifted. The desperation turned to anger, her eyes narrowing as she stood back up. You don't understand, she snapped, her voice shaking with fury. You never understood. You think you're so perfect, so righteous. But you don't know what it's like, you don't know what I need. I stared at her, my face set in stone, refusing to be drawn into whatever twisted logic she was trying to use to justify what she had done. I don't care, I said, my voice steady. I don't care what you think you need. What you did was wrong, and there's no coming back from that. She took a step towards me, her hands clenched into fists, her face twisted in rage. You never even tried to understand, she shouted, her voice breaking. You never cared about what I wanted, what I needed. You only cared about yourself, about your image of what we were supposed to be. I shook my head, my expression unchanging. This isn't about me, I said, my voice low and controlled. This is about you, and the choices you made. You chose to betray me, to betray us. And now you're going to face the consequences. She screamed then, a raw, angry sound that echoed through the room. She lunged at me, her hands reaching out as if to hit me, but I stepped back, my eyes cold as I watched her. Get out, I said, my voice firm, my hand pointing towards the door. This is over. We're over. I want a divorce. She froze, her eyes wide with shock, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. You can't do this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded, my expression unyielding. I already did. Now get out. She stood there for a moment, her body trembling, her eyes filled with hatred and pain. Then, without another word, she turned and ran out of the house, the door slamming shut behind her. I stood there, the silence settling around me like a heavy weight. It was done. There was no going back now. The woman I had loved, the life we had shared, it was all gone. And as much as it hurt, I knew it was the only way forward. I couldn't let her stay, couldn't let her poison my life any longer. It was over, and it was time to move on. After everything that had happened, I knew I couldn't just let it slide. I still had the video, the proof of her betrayal and everything she had done. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about what was right. The owner of the ranch had a right to know what was happening on his property. I didn't hesitate. I sent the video to the ranch owner, attaching a short message explaining what I had seen. I didn't embellish or add anything extra. The video spoke for itself. It was up to him what he wanted to do with the information. It didn't take long for things to explode. A few days later, word got back to me through friends who still had connections at the ranch. She had been fired, and it hadn't been a quiet dismissal. The owner was furious, not just because of what she had done, but because she had brought something so twisted into his business, onto his property. He made it clear that she wasn't welcome there anymore, and from what I heard, it wasn't a gentle conversation. She was thrown out, her reputation destroyed in the process. Her passion, her life, all of it had revolved around that ranch. It was the one thing she had loved, the one thing that she had dedicated herself to, and now it was gone. She didn't just lose a job, she lost her entire world. I heard from mutual friends that she was devastated, that she had broken down completely when it happened. They said she had begged the owner to let her stay, that she had promised to do anything to make it right, but he wouldn't hear it. He was done with her, just like I was. The news spread quickly. It wasn't just her who felt the impact. Everyone who knew her, everyone who worked at the ranch, they all heard about what had happened. She had been a part of that place for so long, and now she was gone. Her name turned into something people whispered about, something they used as a cautionary tale. It was strange to hear it all from the sidelines, to know that her world was falling apart and to feel nothing but a cold sense of justice. She had made her choices, and now she was paying the price. I heard from a couple of friends who still talked to her occasionally. They told me she was lost, that she didn't know what to do with herself anymore. The ranch had been everything to her, and without it, she was adrift. She tried to find work at other ranches, but word had spread, and no one wanted to take a chance on her. She was marked by what she had done, her reputation ruined beyond repair. It was like she had been stripped of her identity, the one thing that had defined her for so long. There was a part of me that felt a sense of closure in hearing all of this. She had taken everything from me, my trust, my love, my belief in her, and now she was facing the consequences of her actions. It wasn't something I celebrated, but it felt like justice had been served. She had made her bed, and now she was lying in it. The life she had destroyed wasn't just mine, it was her own as well. She had thrown it all away for something so twisted, and now she had nothing left. I didn't reach out to her. There was nothing more to say. She was no longer a part of my life, and I didn't need to see her or hear her voice to know that it was over. I heard from friends now and then about how she was doing, but I didn't ask for updates. It was done, and I needed to move on. She was just a memory now, a reminder of what had happened and why I needed to be careful with my trust in the future. As time went on, the news about her started to fade. People moved on, found other things to talk about, and eventually, she was just another story, something that had happened and then been forgotten. Years passed, and I had moved on with my life. I had my own place, a new woman by my side, and things were finally starting to feel normal again. The past was behind me, and I was focused on building a future that didn't involve betrayal or lies. It wasn't easy at first, but over time, I learned to trust again, to let someone new into my life. It felt good to have a sense of stability, to know that I was finally putting the pieces back together. I thought that chapter of my life was closed for good, but then, out of the blue, I got a call from an old friend. "Hey, you're not gonna believe this," he said, his voice carrying a mix of amusement and disbelief. "Your ex?" She moved to another city, got a job at a zoo. I remember feeling a mix of indifference and curiosity. I hadn't heard anything about her in years, and I was fine with that. "Good for her," I said, ready to end the conversation, but my friend continued. "Yeah, well, it would be fine if she wasn't spreading stories about you. She's telling people you're an abuser, that you used to beat her." I could feel my jaw clench, the anger rising inside me. After everything she had done, she had the nerve to try and paint me as the villain. I didn't say much to my friend, just thanked him for the heads up and hung up the phone. But inside, I was boiling. I had left her behind, moved on, and now she was trying to drag me back into her mess. I wasn't going to let that happen. I had kept my distance, let her live her life without interference, but this was too much. She wanted to spread lies about me. Fine. I still had the video, the one that had gotten her fired from the ranch. It wasn't something I wanted to use, but if she was going to try and ruin my reputation,